To go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Head-to-head, but not eye-to-eye, Tory leadership hopefuls lay out what a future Britain looks like in a post-Johnson era.
Very good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Saturday, the 20th of August, and this is Breakfast on GB News with Anne and Mark.
And we're live across the whole of the UK on both your TV and your radio. Wherever you are, you can take us with you. So here is what we've got in store for you today. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak tell a packed crowd of Conservative voters in Manchester what vision they have for Britain after Boris Johnson leaves office. Both candidates, of course, were put on the spot by GB News' Alistair Stewart. Liz Truss says she wants the private sector to grow more than the public sector, whilst Rishi Sunak says government is not here to do everything.
Well, meanwhile, Michael Gove has endorsed Rishi Sunak for the Conservative leadership. He said that the Truss campaign had been a holiday from reality and does not accept the SW1 consensus that Liz Truss has already won.
NHS workers are deserting the profession to become adult entertainers.
Hi guys, my name's James Cowie. I quit my job a year and a half ago to become a full-time OnlyFans creator, when before I worked as a healthcare assistant for 6 years.
Well, we'll be speaking to James a bit later on in the programme about why he has joined that particular website, which I hadn't heard of before, but very big apparently. People pay for adult content from other users.
Hang in the air a bit. Have you ever heard of the slang term Karen? If you haven't, well, it's used by some as a term for an angry, entitled white woman. And now you can be served by Karen by going along to one of her diners in the UK.
Karen, Anne Diamond and Mark Longhurst are coming in 5 minutes to do you an interview. Are you not ready?
Anne Diamond and Mark Longhurst?
Yes.
Oh my God, they were here just last week. They're so fussy, they won't leave me alone. Do they actually want this interview?
Yeah.
Do I have to actually speak to them?
Go and speak to them.
Oh.
That's a Karen. And she's going to be joining us here on Breakfast
dear.
this morning. Don't miss that. And to all genuine Karens out there, I'm sorry about this, because one of my best friends at school was a Karen, but she wasn't a Karen, if you see what I mean.
Right.
But she was Karen.
I think we better ask all Karens to join in by emailing us gbviews@gbnews.uk, and we say sorry before we start too.
I know. I know.
Yes. Anyway, former Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove has thrown his support behind Rishi Sunak in the Conservative leadership contest. He's actually accused Liz Truss of taking a holiday from reality with her tax plans.
Well, his attack on the former cabinet colleague comes as the Tory leadership hopefuls set out their vision for the country at another round of hustings. This time it was in Manchester, hosted by GB News' Alistair Stewart.
Well, the former Chancellor's backed Miss Truss's plan to kneecap striking workers, as they said, pledged to get inflation under control.
Meanwhile, the Foreign Secretary said there should be league tables for police forces and suggested that retired medics could be asked to help clear the COVID backlog. Shall we take a look now at some of the highlights from last night?
is the Sunak vision of how Britain should be through Conservative eyes?
Government can't do everything, but more than that, government shouldn't do everything. We are Conservatives. We believe in personal responsibility. We believe in families. We believe in communities. And yes, COVID happened, but that is not the norm. We've got to be willing to actually just make the argument, because all the pressure is always there. And as that's what you've seen over the last 2 years, that's not me. I don't wake up every morning and when a problem comes my way, think, oh, well, how can the government spend some money to solve this problem? That is wrong. That's not what a Conservative government should do, and that is not what I will do as Prime Minister.
My ambition is for the private sector to grow more than the public sector. And one of the problems I think we've got is there's been an assumption by various members of what I call the economic orthodoxy that Britain is a low-growth country, and therefore everything is static. We have to make sure that we are taxing people to keep up with public spending. That is not my vision. I believe we can get to much higher growth. I want the private sector to be bigger compared to the public sector, and I want a sustainable public sector. You know, we have far too many quangos in this country. We have 500 of them. We need to trim it down to size, and we need to make the government efficient.
I am winning the argument about tackling inflation, being responsible with our borrowing, about actually supporting vulnerable people this autumn and winter, which my plan will do, Liz's plan does not do, about actually reforming our tax system so it delivers growth.
We do need to make sure our police are policing the streets rather than policing Twitter and focusing on the right crimes the public are concerned about. See, what I would do is have league tables that compare police forces and how they are performing so they can really be held to account by the public.
Well, all the action on stage in Manchester last night, and GB News' political correspondent Tom Harwood caught up with Sir Graham Brady, then the chairman of the 1922 committee, on how the leadership hopefuls had fared so far.
What a couple of hours of debate, fantastic, incisive questioning, of course, not just from Alistair, but from the wonderful, wonderful audience here in Manchester as well. I'm standing just outside the auditorium here. We're going to be seeing a lot of people filtering out. We're going to be getting a lot of views from the audience, hopefully from some people that asked questions as well as those that didn't. But before we get into the punters in the audience, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by the chairman of the 1922 committee, the returning officer, indeed, Sir Graham Brady. Sir Graham, I know you have to be studiously neutral in this contest, but just from that observer's position, how is this contest going? Is it going in the way you expected it to?
Well, I was just really happy to be there. It was a great evening, really good presentations from both the candidates, some good rigorous questioning. And I could say one of the debates that goes on, people say, is this too long a contest or not? And I confess that if anything, I would have liked a shorter contest. But here we are 4 weeks in, and we've got 1,400 Conservative members here in Manchester coming to hear the two candidates, put them through their paces. I'm starting to think this is actually a very good thing.
A lot of people are saying that it's a bit repetitive, that this process was potentially too truncated in that first week, that we whittled through all the many candidates that the Conservative MPs had the opportunity to see. Potentially some members would have liked to see some more names through to that final ballot. What do you make of those criticisms of your process?
Well, it's not my process. We have a constitution of the party. It gives the 1922 committee a duty, which is to provide two candidates that will go to the party members. So, of course, some people say we'd rather have 3 or 6 or whatever number. That is what we're charged with doing. We did it in a good, rigorous and efficient process. It took 8 days from start to end. And I think pretty much all of my colleagues, as far as I'm aware, all of my colleagues in Parliament, think we did a good job. We ran a good, free and fair process. And today's evidence, we got 2 very good candidates out for the party and the country to choose between.
Well, it's an interesting question, isn't it? Well done, Tom Harwood, actually,
absolutely,
for collaring Sir Graham Brady there, because he's the man who's had to run this whole election campaign. Let's see what everybody thinks about it. We'd love to hear what you think, obviously, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But with us now is a councillor, Conservative councillor for Epping and Thaden in Essex, and that's Holly Whitbread. Hello.
Good morning.
Hi, lovely to see you. Well, go on. What did you think of last night?
Well, I thought it was a really good debate, actually, and I really enjoyed it. I thought there was a lot of pointed questions from the floor, and actually both candidates I thought did really well last night. I mean, I've always said I'm supporting Liz because her vision of conservatism is probably closer to mine, that kind of low tax vision. But I thought Rishi did really well last night. He's always a really slick performer, and actually that clarification around the levelling up agenda, I thought that was quite an interesting part of the debate as well.
A lot of people seem to come away with the impression that sort of an overriding impression was that there are a lot of people there with a vote who haven't actually cast it yet.
I think that's true. Certainly people I talk to, we've got I live in Essex and we've got the London Hustings coming up in a couple of weeks' time. And actually a lot of people are waiting to really have the opportunity to grill the candidates and listen to how they come across in person and also, you know, how they come across with the audience as well. I think that's really important to people as well, that kind of charisma value.
What do you make then? After the hustings, Michael Gove came out and said he's stepping back from frontline politics, but delivered the sort of body blow by saying Liz Truss was taking a holiday from reality with her tax plans. Do you think this is still the central issue about how we're going to cope with the cost of living crisis and pay for it?
I think that's the key issue of the time, isn't it? I mean, we can see energy costs going up. The cost of living is on everyone's mind, whether you're a low income or a middle incomer, it's on everyone's mind. So it certainly is key, but I think there's just a different approach. Liz is saying let's cut taxes so people can have more money in their pocket. I don't think she's completely ruling out support specifically for the most vulnerable, but she's talking about that low tax approach. And actually, whilst Michael Gove is a big figure and a respected figure, Liz has got many respected cabinet ministers behind her, from Ben Wallace to Theresa Coffey. So, you know, she's got a lot of support behind her.
Yeah. What about, though, the immediate issue of the handouts, as Liz Truss has called them, but clearly still no detailed plans announced by either candidate as to how much and when, even though obviously it's 37 billion being earmarked so far, because it's next Friday that we're getting the price cap being announced. I mean, do you think they really should have come out and said, right, we've got an extra whatever to spend on this?
It's difficult, isn't it? Because actually, at the moment, we've still got a government and they're putting in place support, which was announced actually when Rishi was Chancellor. So we've got that tax rebate going out, the energy support. And I understand what both candidates would do if and when the leadership election is finished, is put an emergency budget in place. But, you know, Liz is going for that different approach. She wants people to have more money in their pocket through tax cuts and promote growth and enterprise in the UK to help tackle inflation, but obviously Rishi's got a different idea about that.
And what is interesting is whether or not these sort of debates actually are addressing the people who are suffering most at the moment due to the cost of living crisis. But of course it is arguable that they haven't got the vote at the moment. So, well, let's talk to you about it. As you know, here on GB News, we like to talk to our viewers and listeners. And Ian Fox joins us now. He's one of our GB News viewers. Hello there, Ian. Hi, good morning.
How are you doing?
We're doing fine, up bright and early, talking about the issues of the day.
Yes.
Do you think
we are up
now,
bright and early?
Yeah, exactly. Do you think now is the time to be talking about, you know, conservatism, different people's views of conservatism, rather than just getting on with addressing the major issue of people having to choose this winter between heating and eating? What do you think?
Well, I think we've got a leadership contest. It's happened. Personally, I wouldn't have liked to. I didn't want Boris to go, but he has, and I understand why, and that was necessary. I agree with that. I think that the choice between heating and eating is a media over dramatisation of the situation. I mean, I don't know, and I can't remember exactly when you said, but I was there in the 70s when we had rampant inflation through the 80s, and there were no jobs for anybody to go to when there were hundreds of people. The economy is not as bad as everybody is making out. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, of course not, but it isn't as bad. It's a bit too much of, how can we make more of a drama out of a crisis?
But could it get bad, bearing in mind what the Bank of England has said about inflation? I mean, we're, 10.1% now? They're talking about maybe 13% or even more. And this is Rishi Sunak's point of view, that we've really got to get things in place now to cope with inflation in the year ahead.
Well, anything could go bad. You know, unfortunately, this is one of life's sort of problems, isn't it? We always have to manage what we live on a day-to-day basis. And far too many people over the last 10, 15 years max out the credit cards far too early. They live well beyond their means. And invariably, the people that are going to suffer for it are going to be the people at the poorest end. But one of the things I was talking to about one of my friends is, you know, who's most worried about it? Because those of us that are on the bottom, we haven't got any more money. You can't have it. You know, that's it. So we'll have to wear coats. We'll have to do whatever it takes to try and keep you know, bread on the table and keep warm. That's life.
I think you're. I was going to say, I think you're absolutely right. People of a certain age do remember the 70s. You know, when the rubbish was piling up in the streets and there were lots of all sorts of unionists on strike for all sorts of different reasons. And it really did seem like the end of the world, but we did get through it, didn't we? So which of the two candidates has most convinced you that they'll be able to actually get us through this?
My original personal choice was for Kemi Badenoch. I think she would have been the best choice politically going forward for the Conservative Party. However, out of the remaining two, Liz Truss, and the reason is she offers a more optimistic future of the country. I don't believe in a down and out Britain, you know, under the foot of the world stage. I don't think the gold medalists, but we're certainly not bottom of the pile. I'm proud that we are still a country that people are trying to get into, you know, by any means possible. Hundreds of people arriving daily. That is not the sign of a country that people don't want to be in. They're not going to Russia or China, from what I can see.
Or France. Yeah. Ian, thank you very much for your time this morning and joining us so early. Much appreciated. Thank you very much indeed.
With a beaming smile. And I must say, that is a word that we haven't heard much at all. And that's optimism, isn't it? At the moment, it's all doom, gloom and despondency. And which candidate makes you think that you know, this country is still a country to be proud of and gives you a sense of optimism? Maybe Ian's dead right there, but do let us know. That's GB Views at gbnews.uk.
Let's bring you up to date with what else is going on today.
Well, a member of the so-called Islamic State terror cell known as the Beatles has been jailed for life after being convicted for his role in the murder of American hostages. El Shafi El-Sheikh, who grew up in London, was one of a gang of 4 Islamist militants branded the Beatles due to their British accents. He was given a life sentence for each of the 8 counts he was convicted of in April.
Well, the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak says he would ban new smart motorways to end what he called a war on motorists. He described them as unsafe and plans to stop them being made while improving existing roads. He's also pledged to prevent rogue parking fines and review low-traffic neighbourhoods over concerns they have led to difficulties for emergency vehicles. Just some of the pledges that he hopes can help him to win that Tory leadership after last night's hustings.
Nurses are to wear new smart glasses to maximise time with patients on home visits. Virtual reality-style goggles are part of a new NHS trial, and they'll transcribe appointments directly to electronic records to reduce time spent on administration tasks. The smart glasses will be trialled at the Northern Lincolnshire and Goole NHS Foundation Trust from next week.
Great until you lose them.
I'm trying to remember who brought in smart motorways.
Good question.
Grant Shapps yesterday said that
Yeah.
he didn't believe in them at all and they were turning out to be a bit of a disaster. My words, not his, but that's more or less what he said. And if Rishi is saying the same thing, who brought in the smart motorways? Because so many people said that it's not going to work.
The Highways Agency were directly responsible. Obviously, the Department of Transport had oversight. And I guess we've had Tory governments now for 12 years, so it may have been at the beginning of that Tory government. And the idea, obviously, was to get the motorways flowing better. But clearly...
But so many people, I mean, it's always seen as controversial. And so many groups were sort of rising up and saying they will cause deaths. And indeed, it is alleged they have actually caused deaths on the road, on the motorways. So I want to know now, we will find out for you, who brought them in the first place?
That's our job for this morning. We'll find out who's to blame.
And if you know, please...
As ever.
Tell us.
Who's to blame?
Put us right. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now, amidst the rising cost of living, the looming threat of recession, the UK also grappling with ongoing industrial action led, of course, by Network Rail, with today only 20% of train services due to run. 45,000 workers taking to the picket lines, leaving many travellers stranded on one of the busiest summer weekends, of course. Our Scotland reporter Davy Donaldson is at Waverley Station in Edinburgh, where a protest is set to take place later this morning. And, of course, Davy, with the festival, a lot of people have been coming and going there. I guess they won't be doing that today.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, a lot of people will be extremely upset the fact that the trains come off about 5:30 this evening in Scotland, certainly. And a lot of people, of course, travelling across Britain, looking to go to the Fringe and enjoy the festival, which has been absolutely fantastic for the whole month of August, but can't get home unless you're going to pay for a taxi. So, yeah, that's a little bit disappointing. Of course it is. We've got 11 routes in Scotland, across England and Wales. There's obviously a lot of services disrupted as well. So that's, it's very, very difficult for people at the moment. Today, obviously, the RMT union, which I'll be speaking to later on today, are taking the strike action over paying conditions. And also, when I spoke to Mick Hogg, the RMT union guy in Scotland last month when the strikes were here, he said that it's not just about paying conditions, it's about the safety of the network. So that's obviously quite paramount there. They're actually concerned about the cutting jobs, I think 2,500 jobs on Network Rail, and they say that's going to affect safety. So we'll speak to Mick Hogg later on this morning to find out what he's got to say on that. But yeah, it's obviously difficult. People trying to get about the business, and they simply can't. And it's not just strikes on the railways, it's strikes on the buses as well. I know in London and the South East there's going to be strikes there, so that's going to obviously affect people. Even if you can't get a train, you can't even get a bus now, so that's going to make a huge impact on people's lives. But certainly here in Scotland, as you say, people trying to get around the business, trying to go to the Fringe, go to enjoy the festival, and that's going to be difficult today. You're obviously going to have to go to an earlier show.
Yes, you wonder how the pickets are getting to where they want to picket today, don't you?
Chauffeur-driven cars.
I suppose, yes. Well, they'll have chartered buses and things. Thanks indeed, David. Thank you very much indeed. It's going to be one of those days, I think, again today for travel.
And do you know he's got his coat on? A little nip of autumn in the air this morning. It was single figures.
What's going on? Absolutely.
Yeah.
We were all suffering from far too much heat just a couple of days ago. We're also suffering in other ways. I don't know if you've had an alert, if you have an Apple device, an iPhone or a pad or a laptop or whatever, but there have been alerts going out saying you must update because, is it a virus, they think?
Well, I think it's actually a security flaw. There's the hackers can get in and take your phone over or your laptop or your Apple device.
Well, we'll be finding out
so you
from
need
an expert.
15.6.1 security update, apparently.
OK, well, we'll find out from somebody who really knows their stuff on this sort of thing, how to safeguard your Apple devices.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Clearing skies for many overnight, but there'll be further wind and rain in the northwest by dawn, and there'll be further showers to come in many spots on Saturday. So a much more changeful weekend compared with the heatwave of last weekend. Weather systems are moving in from the Atlantic, and there's one that is expected to turn up during the early hours of Saturday for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Ahead of that, clear spells for many, 1 or 2 showers still affecting western coasts and hills. But really it's around 2 or 3 in the morning that we'll see some heavy rain and strong winds across western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Coastal gales for the Western Isles. Temperatures holding up at 11 to 13 Celsius here, with single figures across parts of northeast Scotland and some sheltered spots of central and eastern England. Some sunshine in the southeast first thing, showers developing elsewhere, and actually the wind and rain towards the northwest sweeps across the rest of Scotland and Northern Ireland, pushing into northern England by the end of the afternoon as a narrow but quite lively feature. Strong winds, odd rumble of thunder, heavy rain. To the south, 1 or 2 showers, but sunny spells are also expected. Breezy, so it'll feel quite cool, but still the potential for mid-20s in the southeast. High teens, low 20s elsewhere, and as we go into Saturday night, it looks like the showers will mostly ease, but still a few lingering across parts of Wales, as well as central and northern Scotland. Away from the showers, again, temperatures in some sheltered spots dipping into the single figures. So a fresh start on Sunday, but a bright start for many. Plenty of sunny spells for central and eastern, as well as northern parts of the country. The cloud will build towards the west and southwest, and we'll see some persistent rain pushing into North Wales, the North Midlands, as well as Cornwall later in the day. That rain then spreads across the country on Monday, turning to showers later.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. I'm just trying to find out a bit more about smart motorways, who brought them in. They were actually brought in by Highways England, or Highways, it used to be called the Highways Agency.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to find out who actually must have been Transport Secretary at the time. I just think it's odd, isn't it, that Grant Shapps yesterday told us that smart motorways were a bad idea and he would immediately stop them and pull back from that. And now Rishi Sunak saying the same thing.
And I think, actually, there's a moratorium on any more smart motorways being built or finished off at the moment. So they're on hold because, clearly, as Anne was saying, the indications are that with a number of deaths where cars have been hit on what was the hard shoulder and is now the sort of inside lane.
Yeah, and I've interviewed families who've lost family members in those sorts of accidents who said that they have said from the very beginning they were a bad idea.
Yeah, common sense.
So, well, I'm afraid so, yeah. With cars going fast, suddenly you see a red cross on the thing above you and you're thinking, is that motorway? Is everybody else getting it? And suddenly you find a car coming at you instead of going away from you. It was never a really good idea, was it? But we went ahead with it. Must have sunk a fortune into it.
Yes, which they'll have to undo at some stage.
Yes, absolutely,
So, yeah.
which seems...
Let us know your point of view on that, actually. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Plenty of your comments coming in. We'll reflect on those in a moment. But first, let's talk of Apple warning of a serious security risk affecting your iPhone, your iPad, or even your iMac. The latest bug could allow hackers to access your bank accounts, your photos and your emails, the whole shebang.
Yeah, well, Apple have acknowledged the problem in new security reports and admitted that they were aware that this issue may have been actively exploited. And so we'll find out now what you have actually got to do about it. He is tech journalist Will Gart, and he joins us now. Hi there, Will.
Good morning to you both.
Yeah, OK. First things first. What the heck is this? Is it a virus? Is it something wrong with the very design of these products? What's going on?
Yeah, it's an exploit in the software, and this one is this is different to normally because this affects what's called the kernel with a K, not like the kernel that looked after Elvis or the bloke from Kentucky Fried Chicken. And the kernel is the central control system, the central software of any Apple device. And what they've discovered here is a couple of vulnerabilities in that code. Now, vulnerabilities happen all the time on all kinds of devices. Some of that is down to lazy programming. Some of that is down to hackers and other individuals finding errors and finding flaws and looking for holes. But on this particular occasion, this had been discovered. Apple believed it was being used by groups or state actors. So at this stage, people like myself or yourselves probably weren't at risk, but it was highly likely that if you were somebody that, let's say, intelligence communities and people were looking to try and get into their phones, this hack and this leak may have already been in place. So by updating your phone or your device, your tablet or your computer, you instantly patch these two problems. So if it's asked you, your Apple device has asked you to do an update in the last couple of days, go and do it. It'll take about 10 minutes and that'll fix these particular flaws. But this will not be the last time you hear of something like this. And that's not necessarily because Apple are lazy and make poor programming code. It's because there's now a constant battle between the good guys and the bad guys, simplifying it to the clearest, the easiest possible level on getting into our devices. Because what would you rather do? Would you rather go and, try and assault somebody in the street for their wallet? Or would you try and take the money and their data and all of their information from a phone, potentially without them even knowing for a number of hours or days?
Yeah.
Well, yes, that's it. I mean, Mark didn't get the alert, did you?
Yeah, I'm just looking
but
at
he updated anyway.
Yeah.
I did get the alert and haven't updated. So I'm just going to ask you, very fundamentally, what should anyone do who's got an Apple product at the moment? How do you plug in for an update?
Well, you go into if you haven't had the notification, you go into settings on your device, and then you go into the general area of settings, and there's an option called software update on the Apple device. If you go into there and click in there, it will show you that the update is available for you to download. It's available at the moment for Apple iPhones. It's also there for the iPad, and it's there for certain models of Apple computers, laptops and iMacs. Only the latest version of software actually uses a similar software to the mobile devices, which is why it has to be updated. So those are the ones that are currently being updated. It's actually good practice if your device ever tells you to update the software to go ahead and do it. And regardless of what phone or device you're on, if you're on an Apple device or on an Android device, one of the Google phones from companies like Samsung or Sony or tons of other different companies, every month or so, just go into your device, find out in your manual, or go online, find out how to do it, and then go and find out what the software update is. Because every time you update your software, you're actually incrementally fixing all of the problems that the developers may have found. So there may have been other bugs or other ways people could potentially have nefariously got into your device and done stuff with it, and that will patch it up.
Yeah, I'm just looking at my phone. 15.6.1 is the iOS or operating system which you need to have, and it says it's up to date, so it's done it. But as I said, my phone hadn't actually alerted me, even though I've got automatic updates on. But it begs the question, when you pay all this money for these devices, and they're supposed to be state-of-the-art, and, you do your best by updating. They've still got these gaping holes, barn doors open that let the hackers in. Why is that? What's wrong with the systems?
I think you're being slightly unfair to the people who create the software
Really?
and technology.
When you pay all that money?
Yeah, I do, because these devices were created a number of years ago. The software is updated by thousands of different people at these companies. It's not just the companies looking for the errors and the flaws. There are other individuals. There are hackers. There are groups. There are organizations. That can be anybody from GCHQ in the UK to a hacker group in North Korea. It can be anybody looking for these holes to exploit the technology. When there's 1 billion or plus Apple devices now in the hands of people around the world, it becomes a very attractive prospect to find any kind of information about the type of person who holds it. So that is going to happen, and it's just going to be a tit-for-tat battle now. Unfortunately, now we're in the digital age. This is what we're now going to face. It's a constant battle between the company that makes the kit and the people who want to exploit it. And that's going to happen forever. That's not going to be something that's ever going to be beaten. If a company comes out and tells you guys that there is an unbeatable piece of technology, I would look at them and say they're a liar, because there's always going to be ways to exploit technology.
Will, it's great. Thank you so much for helping me understand it a bit better, as well as hopefully lots of others too. Thanks very much. And do stay with us, because there's much more to come, including all the news and views in this morning's newspapers.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good morning to you. You're watching Breakfast here on GB News with me and Mark. But we're going to go through the papers now. We've got Claire Muldoon with us and James Woodhousen, who's a visiting professor of innovation, which is one of the most spectacular titles I've ever read out in my life.
Well, it's forecasting innovation, but I don't think a full phrase could fit on your screen.
Ah, OK. Well, we'll ask you about that a bit later on, shall we? First of all, we ought to get down to, I suppose, the nitty-gritty of what's in the papers.
Yeah.
And Claire, tell us about how, even though we have an NHS, we're being told not to use it.
Yes, so avoid A&E, says NHS, as winter crisis bites early.
Well, in August? Really?
For the first time ever. Now, we are now facing this terrible statistic that's coming from the Office of National Statistics that I'm sure you covered yesterday, that there are more deaths. The deaths are up 5 times on the year, not pre-pandemic. 2019, the figures were. So there's now no longer a death of COVID. It's actually dubbed the death of lockdown because, as you know, we couldn't see doctors, we couldn't get the referrals.
Early diagnosis.
So early diagnosis of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and what's happening now is people are dying because they were not diagnosed at the time. But, as the Telegraph points out, the real failure in the NHS, which, as we know, is on its knees, is the lack of foresight from middle management. In fact, I would say there's too many in middle management in that tier
As
in the
Liz
NHS.
Truss said last night in the Hustings. Yeah.
Let's get rid of it. And the infrastructure in the terms of IT in the NHS is doomed. Now, we've got, in some places in the country, 40-hour waits for ambulances. We are not an underdeveloped country, I'm sorry. There has been so much money continually pumped into the NHS, and yet it seems to be completely mismanaged. I think people are...
What also appears to be extraordinary is that a lot of people are having trouble finding their GP at the moment, actually getting an appointment with a GP. And so if you can't get an appointment with your GP, you're likely to trot along to A&E and at least get something done then. But we're told you mustn't do that. Not to go to A&E if you can't get to see your GP. So who are you
have to be referred, absolutely. Yeah.
That's the point. That is the point. Now, A&E has always been the go-to for people who cannot, you know, it's almost like the living well, who think they've got an issue, who will perceive themselves to have something wrong with them. Accident and emergency. It's supposed to be something that's happened, there's blood gushing out, you know, there's something terrible, a road traffic accident.
Or you think,
but
you know,
that
your
is
child's
not...
got a fever and you're worried about meningitis or something.
Or sepsis or whatever.
Yes, anything like that. And the doctors say, good, you should bring your child in if you're worried about them. But now we're being told not to.
But the telephone line's 111 because they're frightened, I think, of legal cases coming against them. Send them straight through to A&E.
As we have a visiting professor of innovation, what should the innovation be then in terms of management of the NHS? Because clearly successive governments, both Labour and Conservative, have wrestled with this and failed, it seems.
Well, I think they do have to clear out a lot of the middle and indeed senior management. This isn't technological innovation, what I specialise in, come to that. But I was just looking at the NHS Confederation that was in the news yesterday and today, and its critique of government. It represents the leaders of healthcare trusts. They're all on 150,000. 170,000. I looked it all up. That alone doesn't explain the financial crisis in the NHS, but it does suggest to me that a lot of clinicians have been promoted above their pay grade and are now effect to do good management. And that's a great mistake. One of the things that they're leaving out is, as Carol rightly said, the shocking IT in the NHS.
Is it the case that actually a lot of these administrators aren't medical experts, that they are bureaucrats who don't realise what the medical necessity is?
Well, I think that's half of it. The other half is that the kind of more middle management grades is that they're clinicians now bumped up after a 6-week course in management. And I've dealt with them before, and they affect to know everything about where transport is going for old people in the next 10 years, what old people will be doing with IT and so on. And they're completely unqualified for this. They pontificate a lot. And I think one of the great things that came out of the pandemic, I think Carol's absolutely right.
Claire.
Claire's absolutely early. Claire's absolutely right that it was the lockdown, not the virus, that has caused all these excess deaths. Just as it's the water companies, not climate-induced drought, that has led us to a pretty pass in water. We're not subject just to natural forces. You know,
infrastructure.
We're in charge. Yeah, we're in charge of this world. And one of the good things that came out of the pandemic is the greater attention to hygiene, and there are more and more hygiene robots now cleaning out MRSA and all the other things from hospitals. So that was part of the upside. Where do we hear about it?
Can I just ask on that? I mean, do they do anything, these robots? I've seen them going around looking terribly glamorous and, you know, shining lights all over it. Does it work?
Yeah, it does. I mean, they're robots and robots, right? And the light is ultraviolet. To pick up stuff. But what they've also done is especially in America, they've managed to process the information much faster and more cheaply, and then deal with it more effectively. So we never hear about mechanisation or robots from either of the Tory candidates at the moment.
Yeah, that's kind of like going off-piste a minute, you know, quite a lot, actually.
A robot in charge of the Tory party?
Well, not even the Conservative Party, Mark. I would go further and say let's not even have robots anywhere near patients, because that might be the next thing to diagnosis.
which I think would be horrendous.
Well, they talk about robots being in care homes, don't they? Looking after, looking after people, looking
I was
after
talking
patients.
just about hygiene. That's not that's not off-piece. That's very central to the management of the NHS.
But let's move on, rather than go off-piste or not, to Michael Gove, who has announced overnight that he's stepping back from frontline politics, and meanwhile he's decided
Going out with a bang.
Rishi Sunak, and he says there are an awful lot of people who haven't yet made up their mind, and he believes that there are a lot of Sunak supporters who might well come out of the woodwork.
Yes, well, the two things I notice about this, page 7 of the Times. First of all, he's saying that Liz Truss is taking a holiday from reality on her proposals on taxes and things like that. If they're so nasty to each other, the Tory leaders, one wonders what they're going to do to the RMT or anybody that they really hate. And it's a very worrying thing that you've got this sort of demonisation
blue,
of
as they call it,
your own, you know, people you were in government with a minute ago, and now the worst thing ever. But the other thing I was struck by was that in his support for Rishi, he attacks those who say that Rishi's approach to the economy is Labour light. And yet in the same article written by him, I used to work for him, Michael Gove, a little bit on the Times years and years ago, he says, central to unlocking potential and improving productivity in Britain is further reform of our education system. As soon as I hear the word unlocking, I'm already getting nervous, right? Because you can't unlock innovation. It's rubbish. And the second thing is that nostrum that by fixing education we can improve our productivity is pure Labour. I'm all in favour of education. I'm a professor. I thought education was not about improving productivity, but about education, actually. And so he's really thinking that the key to productivity is not supply-side reform with technology and all of those things, which is what we need in energy and water, but rather more universities or, you know, better grades or something like that. That's all good, but it doesn't do it.
OK, from the good to the bad,
Yeah.
and the consequences of all this, the Independent's picked up on the economic costs, not big business, but small business.
Small, medium businesses and enterprises in this country employ 16 million people. You know, it's a huge chunk of the economy and huge chunk of the employable workforce. The Independent have gone with the lost generation. Small businesses across the UK are folding as energy bills start to land.
Bills, right.
The energy, well, that and a lot of other things, Mark. You've also got Cineworld. They're going into administration because of the lack of Hollywood blockbusters, the lack of draw to people to the cinemas now. This is a tip of the iceberg, and it's going to go on for months and months and months. But what we have to do is try and address it. One small business owner that I know said that she can't even give a bonus because that's subject to tax. She's not that in the position of being a multinational. She says, why don't you allow employers of all sizes to help their employees meet the rising costs of living with every penny going into the pockets of staff? She talks about the tax-free allowances, £6 a week for the energy, but that's not a lot. That's not going to touch anything. She can't even give them free lunches because it's a taxable benefit. You know, there's all of these benefits not in kind that employers have the ability to do, but they need the tax help to do it. They need the tax break to do it. We need to help small businesses.
Cuts in a completely different way.
Yeah,
for the small relief for the business.
For the businesses.
But we've had 12 years of a Tory government.
Yep.
And small business is what Conservatism is all about, isn't it?
Well, exactly. But through the 2 years of the lockdown and pandemic, there's been no one utilising the small businesses, not only on the high street, but all over, even with small independent shops like Etsy, the online shop where you can go and get things personalised, made, not on the high street. Some unique, original products that you can buy. People haven't been using them because they can't, and also they can't order them because these companies can't actually get the materials they need because of all the stock shortages.
Sadly, we're running out of time here, but I think we've got time for a quickie here because we've just been talking about, you know, crashing your devices and updating your iOS software and stuff. James, apparently Janet Jackson's high notes could crash laptops.
Yes, well, I'm unfamiliar with Janet Jackson's recent work, so I don't know the song or the video, Rhythm Nation, although I like the sound of it. But apparently if you play this, it can cause a vibration at a certain frequency with not just your own laptop, but somebody else's when she hits a high note.
Really?
And that, yeah.
So like the old cartoon of the glass smashing, it's your computer smashing this
That's
time.
right. And, you know, this is a new one for me. I must say, even though I specialise in technology, I had no idea that a singer could turn a computer off.
And Microsoft have actually said this. They've confirmed that it is a problem.
That's right. Well, I like the idea of playing it on my machine and then making somebody else's go wonky.
Well, I'm very tempted to sort of find it.
I think you can get our producers to try and get the Rhythm Nation video up for us and see what happens.
See what happens.
It might take us off air, who knows? Yeah.
OK, well, thanks very much indeed.
welcome.
We'll see you again in about an hour's time, if that's OK with you. Go and have a coffee or something.
Yes.
Let's talk about the cleanliness of Britain's beauty spots, because they are under scrutiny because there have been so many reports just recently of the foul-smelling oil dump in Manchester Woodland, E. coli found in a Kent river, and swimming now banned at some beaches in Devon and East Sussex.
Yeah, we're back to those water companies. I think it's a problem that seems to be getting worse, affecting more and more parts of the country. Well, our next guest here to tell us more, and this is Anthony Day, who is host of the Sustainable Futures podcast. Anthony, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I mean, is it actually a lack of investment by our water companies that's led to this state?
I think it very much is, yes. And of course, your guest earlier on was saying it's not the climate crisis. The climate crisis, in fact, the drought, has revealed the shortcomings in the infrastructure which is managed by the water companies.
As we were hearing, actually, during our newspaper review, it's not so much that we can't handle these problems that the planet throws up at us, it's that we're just mismanaging it.
I think you're right, yes. And I think there are two sides to that. One is the water companies, of course, who have a duty to consumers, a duty to the environment, but also a duty to shareholders, and that seems to be an imbalance. On the other hand, of course, we've got the Environment Agency, which is in a very difficult situation. It's underfunded. It has declared that it can only actually respond to the major infringements of regulations because it just hasn't got the staff to look at most of them. And at the same time, I don't think we can say that we can reduce the civil servants in the Environment Agency, nor can we reduce the regulations. We need to tighten up on the water companies, which, after all, are still leaking at least 1 in every 5 litres before it gets to the consumer. But they are meeting the current targets. So those targets have got to be tightened up. It's regulation, and it's a question of having the people to enforce those regulations, which I think is vital.
Yeah, the Environment Agency did its job with Southern Water. £90 million they managed to get at a High Court hearing, or a court hearing where the judge really criticised Southern Water for basically trying to hide what they were doing. I mean, is that the answer, the fines, and really take them to task on a legal basis?
To some extent, but I think everybody would prefer that money not to be paid in fines, but to be paid in investing in the infrastructure. But up till now, I think water companies have thought, well, the fines are a cost of doing business. They're cheaper than actually upgrading the infrastructure. And the other problem with the fines is that apart from that exceptional one to Southern Water, the fines are determined not by the Environment Agency, which brings the prosecution, but by the judge. And the chief executive of the Environment Agency said in the latest report that in many cases, the fines that are laid down by the judge are trivial. They're less than the chief executive's salary, and they're not a disincentive to bad practice by the water companies.
Experimenting. Yeah, I mean, this is clearly a huge problem and a growing problem, and it's affecting ordinary people who can't even go swimming, or when they do go swimming in the sea are absolutely appalled by what they come up against, literally. And yet, you know, you hear the politicians at the moment, and they're not addressing this. In fact, green issues are being absolutely pushed to one side, aren't they?
Well, they are, yes. That's very, very noticeable. If you look at the whole context of green issues, the climate emergency, the need to go for things like insulation, which will cut our energy use and thereby cut our carbon emissions, they're nowhere in the present debate. And I think that's very, very worrying.
Yeah, and I think individual people as well, I suppose we all have a responsibility. Should we individuals be doing more? Thinking of things that we flush away, thinking of the water that we use and why we use it, things like that.
Well, we should, yes, but I don't think that we should go as far as blaming the consumer, because we don't want to let the water companies off the hook, because they are the people who have got the levers of power in their hands. Yes, we shouldn't waste water. Yes, it would be a good idea not in the present environment to use a hosepipe, whether there's a hosepipe ban or not. Cut down the time you spend in the shower and things like that. Use water responsibly. But the ultimate responsibility is with the water companies, I think.
And where are you on the argument? Keir Starmer has retreated from that position about renationalising critical infrastructure such as the water companies.
Well, I don't think... Yes, ultimately, that's possibly a good idea, but I think it comes down initially to whoever's running the water infrastructure should be monitored, should be regulated, and should be held to account. But I'm not particularly happy with privatised water because it hasn't fulfilled its promises of renewing the infrastructure. And let's look at who's owning not just the water companies, but the railway companies, the energy companies. They're all foreign investors. So those profits which are coming out of what we pay for our water bills, most of those profits are going abroad. And they're not actually being spent here in this country. So I think ultimately nationalisation might be a good idea, but actually management, regardless of who actually owns the infrastructure, management and regulation is what we have to do to get it right.
And getting the leadership right as well. Anthony, thanks so much indeed for joining us today. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Yes, it's. I just wonder what your views are on it. We've got lots of views coming in, actually. A bit later on, we're going to be meeting a Karen. And we were talking earlier about what a Karen is. And my apologies hugely if your name is Karen, because you're not going to like it. Basically, a Karen is an entitled, mouthy white woman, I think. Yeah?
Yeah, well, Adrian's given us a bit of help on that as well. Hi, Anne and Mark. In my opinion, that's not how a Karen behaves. We had a little clip earlier. Your Karen was like a female Basil Fawlty. A proper Karen is simply a slur attached to a non-woke woman.
Is that, well, I don't know.
Right.
See, there's this big movement in Australia of Karens opening diners where you can actually go and pay for a restaurant meal or burger or something and be harangued by the waitress.
Isn't that normal? No.
Why would you want to? I don't know, but apparently it's absolutely taken off in Sydney, Australia, and it's coming here.
Should we share Dave's little note
Oh,
at the end?
Dave, very naughty. Dave's got in touch, said, my wife is called Karen and she's always angry.
Full stop.
Sorry about that. Anyway, we're going to be meeting Karen a bit later on in today's programme. But plus, of course, we'll be bringing you all the latest updates on the politics and the strikes and everything else that's going on today. Do join in, maybe with something that's going to put a smile on our faces. That would be nice. gbviews@gbnews.uk. As for the politics, tax cuts are fine, says Archie, but it does nothing for pensioners or people on benefits, so something has to be done. £400 is fine, but it's not enough. £740 a month state pension isn't enough to pay for gas and food.
Oh, this is in answer to our question about the smart motorways that you were posing that question earlier. Hi, guys. Smart motorways brought in by Cameron's government, taking away hard shoulder, most stupid idea ever. Richie.
That was during David Cameron's government, was it? Well,
yeah.
Somebody has to be held accountable for that, don't you think?
Although David's saying, introduced in 2006, Blair's government, everything going wrong seems to lead back to the last time Labour were in power.
Okay.
This is 12 years ago now. So
We've got to try and find this out because we were talking to Grant Shapps, who's the Transport Secretary at the moment. We were talking to him yesterday. He said one of the first things he'd do if he still holds the job in a month's time.
We shall see.
He said he would rescind these smart motorways. They're not working. And then we hear Rishi saying much the same thing last night. And a lot of people who've been campaigning against them for years are probably now saying, we've told you so. We've been telling you so for a long time. So who do you blame for bringing in the smart motorways? We'll try and find out literally that.
Yeah, and there is a moratorium on any more new smart motorways at the moment. The Highways Agency has actually agreed to that, so clearly until it's sorted out. But as you were saying, what's the situation then about reverting them back to how they were, and how much extra is that going to cost?
Yeah.
That's the other issue.
How much money has been wasted, in other words? It's absolutely appalling. So, on to last night's Hustings, which was, really put the two on the spot. The problem is the two candidates, says Keith. I think the Tory party membership wanted new young blood, like Tom Tugendhat or Kemi Badenoch. But we've ended up with the two Tory MPs from the cabinet, which shows that they're out of touch with their membership. Interesting point.
Yeah, and obviously Tom Harwood is actually putting the point to Sir Graham Brady, chairman of the 1922 committee. Did they get it right in actually knocking out all those other candidates so soon? And then another 5 weeks with just the two of them left. So,
well, in a couple of minutes, we'll be bringing you bang up to date with what happened last night. Do stay with us.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Head-to-head, but not eye-to-eye, Tory leadership hopefuls lay out what a future Britain looks like in a post-Boris Johnson era.
Very good morning. It's 7 o'clock on Saturday, the 20th of August. This is Breakfast on GB News, this morning with Anne and Mark.
And we're live across the whole of the UK on both your TV and your radio. Wherever you are, you can take us with you, as you know. Here's what we've got in store for you this morning. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak tell a packed crowd of Conservative voters in Manchester what vision they have for Britain after Boris Johnson leaves office. Both candidates were put on the spot by GB News' Alistair Stewart. Liz Truss said she wants the private sector to grow more than the public sector, whilst Rishi Sunak said government isn't here to do everything.
Meanwhile, Michael Gove's now endorsed Rishi Sunak for the Conservative leadership. He said that the Truss campaign had been a holiday from reality and does not accept the SW1 consensus, as he said, that Liz Truss has already won.
NHS workers are deserting the profession to become adult entertainers.
Hi guys, my name is James Cowie. I quit my job a year and a half ago to become a full-time OnlyFans creator, when before I worked as a healthcare assistant for 6 years.
What the heck? Yes, we'll speak to James a bit later on in the show about why he's joined the website where people pay for adult content from other users.
And have you ever heard of the slang term Karen? If you haven't, it's used by some as a term for an angry, entitled white woman. And now you can be served by Karen by going along to one of her diners in the UK.
Karen, Anne Diamond and Mark Longhurst are coming in 5 minutes to do you an interview. Are you not ready?
Anne Diamond and Mark Longhurst?
Yes.
Oh my God, they were here just last week. They're so fussy, they won't leave me alone. Do they actually want this interview?
Yeah.
Do I have to actually speak to them?
Go and speak to them.
I'd be worried about what she puts in my burger, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Anyway, Karen is going to be joining us here on breakfast this morning.
Is that why we haven't had our coffees yet?
Probably, yeah. Yes, and as ever, you can join in any of our discussions. And our apologies right now if your name is a bona fide Karen. Do you see yourself as that sort of person? Anyway, do join in any of our discussions. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
So, as we've just been telling you, former Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove has thrown his support behind Rishi Sunak in the Conservative leadership contest. He accused Liz Truss of taking a holiday from reality with her tax plans.
His attack on the former cabinet colleague comes as the Tory leadership hopefuls set out their vision for the country at another round of hustings, this time in Manchester, hosted by GB News' Alistair Stewart.
Well, the former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, backed the plan to kneecap striking workers, as it had been put, and pledging to get inflation under control. Of course, his main point that he wants.
Meanwhile, the Foreign Secretary said there should be league tables for police forces and suggested that retired medics could be asked to help clear the COVID backlog. So let's take a look, shall we, at some of the highlights from last night.
What is the Sunak vision of how Britain should be through Conservative eyes?
Government can't do everything, but more than that, government shouldn't do everything. We are Conservatives. We believe in personal responsibility. We believe in families. We believe in communities. And yes, COVID happened, but that is not the norm. We've got to be willing to actually just make the argument, because the pressure is always there. And as that's what you've seen over the last 2 years, that's not me. I don't wake up every morning and when a problem comes my way, think, oh, well, how can the government spend some money to solve this problem? That is wrong. That's not what a Conservative government should do, and that is not what I will do as Prime Minister.
My ambition is for the private sector to grow more than the public sector. And one of the problems I think we've got is there's been an assumption by various members of what I call the economic orthodoxy that Britain is a low-growth country, and therefore everything is static. We have to make sure that we are taxing people to keep up with public spending. That is not my vision. I believe we can get to much higher growth. I want the private sector to be bigger compared to the public sector, and I want a sustainable public sector. You know, we have far too many quangos in this country. We have 500 of them. We need to trim it down to size, and we need to make the government efficient.
I am winning the argument about tackling inflation, being responsible with our borrowing, about actually supporting vulnerable people this autumn and winter, which my plan will do, Liz's plan does not do, about actually reforming our tax system so it delivers growth.
We do need to make sure our police are policing the streets rather than policing Twitter and focusing on the right crimes the public are concerned about. See, what I would do is have league tables that compare police forces and how they are performing so they can really be held to account by the public.
A very impressive-looking hustings, I thought, last night, didn't you?
Especially Alistair's socks. Do you notice?
Yes, I
pink
did notice
socks.
pink socks. Well, you have to stand out somehow, don't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting, but of course it's always very interesting after these sort of things as well, in what they nowadays call the spin room. And our very own Tom Harwood was there, and see who he caught.
What a couple of hours of debate, fantastic, incisive questioning, of course, not just from Alistair, but from the wonderful, wonderful audience here in Manchester as well. I'm standing just outside the auditorium here. We're going to be seeing a lot of people filtering out. We're going to be getting a lot of views from the audience, hopefully from some people that asked questions as well as those that didn't. But before we get into the punters in the audience, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by the chairman of the 1922 committee, the returning officer, indeed, Sir Graham Brady. Sir Graham, I know you have to be studiously neutral in this contest, but just from that observer's position, how is this contest going? Is it going in the way you expected it to?
Well, I was just really happy to be there. It was a great evening, really good presentations from both the candidates, some good rigorous questioning. And I've got to say, one of the debates that goes on, people say, is this too long a contest or not? And I confess that if anything, I would have liked a shorter contest. But here we are 4 weeks in, and we've got 1,400 Conservative members here in Manchester coming to hear the two candidates, put them through their paces. I'm starting to think this is actually a very good thing.
A lot of people are saying that it's a bit repetitive, that this process was potentially too truncated in that first week, that we whittled through all the many candidates that the Conservative MPs had the opportunity to see. Potentially some members would have liked to see some more names through to that final ballot. What do you make of those criticisms of your process?
Well, it's not my process. We have a constitution of the party. It gives the 1922 committee a duty, which is to provide two candidates that will go to the party members. So, of course, some people say we'd rather have 3 or 6 or whatever number. That is what we are charged with doing. We did it in a good, rigorous and efficient process. It took it 8 days from start to end. And I think pretty much all of my colleagues, as far as I'm aware, all of my colleagues in Parliament, think we did a good job. We ran a good, free and fair process. And today's evidence, we got 2 very good candidates out for the party and the country to choose between.
So Graham Brady speaking to Tom outside the hall there in Manchester last night at the Hustings. Well, assistant editor at the Conservative Home website, William Atkinson, joining us now in the studio with his reaction to what you saw and heard, because clearly a lot of people picked up with the questions from the audience. And to me, it indicated perhaps there are rather more undecideds out there. There were some pretty pointed questions at both candidates.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we don't want to generalise from a few examples from people who were speaking. But yes, it did seem that there were quite a few people there who actually hadn't quite made up their minds. And I think we did a survey this week that suggested about 60% of party members have so far voted. And that still leaves 40%. But even if that is, not that I would ever pour scorn on our own excellent survey, which is, in my opinion, the best possible metric is there for judging Tory party members. But however, if we were slightly off by a point or two, I would not be surprised if that meant that there were indeed a substantial bulk of members who haven't even made up their minds yet.
Well, and the question is, if they were all to make up their minds for Rishi Sunak, would it be enough to stem what looks like a Liz Truss surge ahead?
No, I will say I haven't really done much maths since I got my GCSE, but my boss and I were sort of debating this earlier in the week when we were going through the various figures coming through from our survey and trying to work out if Sunak basically won over all undecided voters, could he quite get across the line? I think, actually, we're probably at the point now where, unless there has been a huge sort of polling error from us, from YouGov, from all the other organisations, I think Liz Truss is probably across the line.
Got the critical mass,
yeah.
And what about Michael Gove's announcement now? Not only that he's stepping back from frontline politics, but that he's going for Rishi Sunak, and as he's put the knife into Liz Truss, taking a holiday from reality with her tax plans.
Well, I think so. I spent most of the day yesterday at Lord's, and that was rather more dispiriting than the debate in the evening. But I think if I can compare Michael Gove now to a sort of tail-ender like Stuart Broad giving it a whack when it doesn't really matter, is that, frankly, we're so far into this leadership contest, so many people have voted, that Michael Gove coming out to say this today is unlikely to, I think, A, change anybody's votes, but B, if it looks odds on that Liz Truss is already going to be our next Prime Minister, she and Michael Gove haven't got on for quite a while. There's been a lot of debates in Cabinet where they haven't aligned, especially on things like free trade, etc. So I think if he knows that he's not going to get a Cabinet position from this next administration...
But isn't that the point, that if she becomes Tory leader, she's also going to be Prime Minister, and he's indicating that she may have got it wrong on her economic plans?
Yes. I mean, I've been quite critical of our economic plans. You know, I wrote an article relatively recently saying Trussonomics is a bit pie in the sky, and I think it is. And I think, frankly, we saw this yesterday. Her primary focus is on going for growth, but I think the primary focus at the moment should be dealing with inflation and dealing with the coming crisis in people's energy bills. It's very easy for a government to go to growth, turn on all the taps, increase spending, increase borrowing, cut taxes, etc. But like Anthony Barber in the early 1970s, that just sends you straight for a sort of big inflationary crisis and a big bill that you have to pay at some point. So I think she's got the focus wrong there. Yeah.
William,
OK, well, we'll leave it there for the moment, but of course
Sorry
it goes...
about the cricket as well.
It goes on and on. We were talking just about an hour ago to one of our own GB viewers called Ian Fox, and I just had a message in from Linda. Hi. She says, well done to Ian Fox. He said what I've been thinking for ages. This slogan, eating or heating, concocted by the media a few years ago, actually, is a load of rubbish. When we had it really bad in the 70s and people had to economise, no one starved. In fact, benefits weren't in abundance like they are now. I'm not saying there won't be hardship, because there will be, but people today don't want to give anything up. This crisis isn't going to last forever, and we will get through it, but please stop dramatising this situation. I think it would be a good learning curve for anyone under 40 and put things into perspective. They might appreciate things more in the future.
Bit more grit.
Some gritty views.
Yeah.
So shall we get another one? Let's go to Curtin in South Staffordshire and speak to one of our GB News viewers and listeners, Des Cooper. Hi there, Des.
Morning.
Good morning. What do you think on that? You know, the heating or eating, the crisis that the media keeps talking about at the moment. Do you think it's real, or do you think it is a bit of a media hype?
I mean, the media always love a line. They always like to attack through a line. And, you know, they've got a line now, and they're going to keep on repeating it. And, you know, whichever of the two candidates come through, they've actually got to be able to deal with this in a reasonably sensible way. Because most of the people who are going to vote for them in the next election will be listening to what they've got to say, rather than this media representation of a crisis. And it would be really nice if the media could focus on what the real crisis is, which is Putin weaponising energy supplies. I mean, I'm sure he never really wanted to do this or planned to do this, but although he's probably not doing what he wanted to do in Ukraine, and we're being the Ukraine government, with the help of the UK and many others, is helping to push them back, he is really having a massive effect. We're seeing social unrest gathering in the UK and other Western countries. We're seeing economic crisis looming. He has weaponised our energy supply. And I want to know from both candidates, what are they going to do about it? Because that really is the elephant in the room. This isn't going away anytime soon.
And that point was... That point, Des, was made from the audience with a retired mining engineer saying that perhaps the answer lies beneath our feet. He was talking about the natural gas stores, and of course that's fracking to get it out of the ground, which is still very controversial for many local communities. What's your viewpoint on that?
My viewpoint on that is that with fracking, obviously it's a new technology in the UK. We can see what has happened globally, and that seems to be good. And we would have to go carefully down that road. But I think that we absolutely have to go down that road. And not only that, I believe that the government should have a major role in this, so that we have some say in the price of the gas when we are able to extract that gas from the ground. Because what our aim must be is to return energy to a reasonable price. And to do that, we have to have our own supplies of energy. And laudably, the government is investing in these wind turbines, many of which will be in the North Sea. And laudably, the government is investing in nuclear power. And we will hopefully have that rolling out. But one thing about the North Sea, that's always going to be strategically vulnerable. And if we have gas which we can turn on or turn off, then that would be a very, very useful asset for not only the domestic consumers, but for industrial consumers in the UK.
It's fascinating talking to you there, Des. Can I just ask you, I know you're retired now. What did you used to do as a profession?
I was a teacher.
Of?
I was a teacher of geography. I was a head of geography and a head of citizenship.
Oh,
and people always say, oh, what's citizenship? As though they don't know.
Yeah, well, and maybe that's a point, yeah, actually. Thank you so much for joining us. Really great to talk to you, Des. That's Des Cooper there, one of our GB viewers
Giving
and
a
listeners.
geopolitical view.
Well, exactly. Wasn't he just? Yeah, that was really quite something. And if you want to get in touch on any of the things we're talking about, you always know you can. gbviews@gbnews.uk. And occasionally we just might ring you back and ask you on air too. Shall we bring you up to date with the latest headlines then? More travel disruption is expected today as union members from 18 train companies walk out. Only 20% of rail network is said to be running, with some parts of the country having no trains running at all. Train services on Sunday will be affected, of course, by the aftermath of today's strike action.
Well, back to the politics. Former Chancellor Rishi Sunak saying he would ban new smart motorways to end what he called a war on motorists. He described them as unsafe. He plans to stop them being made while improving existing roads. He's also pledged to prevent rogue parking fines, as he called them, and to review low-traffic neighbourhoods over concerns they've led to difficulties for emergency vehicles. So some of the pledges he hopes that can help him to win that Tory leadership.
A member of the so-called Islamic State's terror cell known as the Beatles has been jailed for life after being convicted for his role in the murder of American hostages. He actually grew up in London. He was one of a gang of 4 Islamist militants branded the Beatles because of their British accents. He was given a life sentence for each of the 8 counts he was convicted of in April.
Nurses are to start wearing new smart glasses to maximise their time with patients on home visits, the virtual reality-style goggles, part of an NHS trial, and will transcribe appointments directly to electronic records, all to reduce time spent on admin. The smart glasses being trialled at the Northern Lincolnshire and Goole NHS Foundation Trust from next week.
I'd like to find out more about those smart glasses. I can't quite get what they're meant to be doing, can you? What do you see when you look into them?
I'd lose them.
Well, there is that as well, isn't there? Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing about glasses, they get themselves lost all the time. Now, a week of rail strikes headed by Network Rail that today will see just 20% of the UK's train services running. Well, it means that countless travellers and commuters and tourists are having to make alternative plans. I don't know how, though. With 45,000 workers taking to the picket line, we're joined by our Scotland reporter, Davy Donaldson, who is live, I think, from Waverley Station in Edinburgh. Am I right there? Is that where you are, Davy?
Yes, that's correct. Here in Edinburgh at Waverley Station. I have to say, a rather windy and wet Edinburgh this morning. But yeah, you're right. Obviously, a lot of people, 45,000 workers out on strike. And that's causing chaos across the country. We've only got 20% of trains running. Here in Scotland, we've only got 11 routes running, and they're all in the central belt, surprise, surprise, between Edinburgh and Glasgow. But if you're further north, obviously Perth, Dundee, Inverness, Aberdeen, etc., you've got no trains at all. So you have to rely on the bus or obviously your own transport. But yeah, this is a dispute over pay by the RMT, and they are looking for obviously pay conditions to be improved. And one of the things they're looking for is basically like 2,500 workers are going to be apparently laid off, and they've got concerns about safety. I'll be speaking to Mick Hogg, the RMT convener up in Scotland here. I'm speaking to him around about 8:10, so we'll find out more from him then. But yeah, I mean, it's not exactly a great day here in Edinburgh, so my advice is if you don't want to travel, don't bother, stay at home. It's definitely a day for staying at home and just enjoy today. But of course, we've got the Fringe going on here, the Fringe Festival, the largest festival, comedy festival in the world. So a lot of people will be disappointed because the last train tonight is about 5:30, 6:30. So yeah, a lot of people will not be able to see these shows, which mainly take place late at night. So a lot of people are going to be disappointed unless they've got accommodation here. And you can imagine during the Fringe, accommodation here is certainly a premium.
Oh, well, David, yeah, that's terrible if the last train is at 5:30, because most of the evening gigs in the Fringe are much later than that, aren't they? And so all your stand-up comedians and all of those, they're going to be really badly affected, which is a terrible shame for them. However, it's all over the country at the moment as well. Davey, thanks very much indeed. And do stay with us here on GB News, because in a couple of moments, Aidan McGee will be taking us through all of the weekend sport.
And the big fight.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Clearing skies for many overnight, but there'll be further wind and rain in the northwest by dawn, and there'll be further showers to come in many spots on Saturday. So a much more changeful weekend compared with the heatwave of last weekend. Weather systems are moving in from the Atlantic, and there's one that is expected to turn up during the early hours of Saturday for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Ahead of that, clear spells for many, 1 or 2 showers still affecting western coasts and hills. But really it's around 2 or 3 in the morning that we'll see some heavy rain and strong winds across western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Coastal gales for the Western Isles. Temperatures holding up at 11 to 13 Celsius here, with single figures across parts of northeast Scotland and some sheltered spots of central and eastern England. Some sunshine in the southeast first thing, showers developing elsewhere, and actually the wind and rain towards the northwest sweeps across the rest of Scotland and Northern Ireland, pushing into northern England by the end of the afternoon as a narrow but quite lively feature. Strong winds, odd rumble of thunder, heavy rain. To the south, 1 or 2 showers, but sunny spells are also expected. Breezy, so it'll feel quite cool, but still the potential for mid-20s in the southeast. High teens, low 20s elsewhere, and as we go into Saturday night, it looks like the showers will mostly ease, but still a few lingering across parts of Wales, as well as central and northern Scotland. Away from the showers, again, temperatures in some sheltered spots dipping into the single figures. So a fresh start on Sunday, but a bright start for many. Plenty of sunny spells for central and eastern, as well as northern parts of the country. The cloud will build towards the west and southwest, and we'll see some persistent rain pushing into North Wales, the North Midlands, as well as Cornwall later in the day. That rain then spreads across the country on Monday, turning to showers later.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GBNews.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back and a very good morning if you've just joined us. Me and Mark here with breakfast on GB News. It is 7:26. Now, there's a big fight tonight, and as you know, you probably know by now, boxing sort of tends to go right over mountains.
Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss, is it?
Yeah, exactly. I was sort of only just getting my head around that, but Aidan McGee is here to tell us all about it. What is this big fight?
Oh, Sunak against Truss.
No, not that one.
We've been really bored by that one.
Meanwhile, in Jeddah, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, look, it's Anthony Joshua, celebrated British heavyweight. It's all or nothing for him tonight against Alexander Usyk. It's the second fight they fought back last September, I think it was.
And he didn't do too well that time.
No, he didn't. He was schooled, quite frankly, by a much smaller guy, somebody who kind of, would normally struggled to make that weight at heavyweight, but he just looked so much better pound for pound in that ring that night. It was a real dominant performance by Usyk, and chillingly afterwards he said, "This isn't even me at my best." And there's people who've been covering it much more than I have since then. In fact, I'm going to bring somebody in now as a former European champion and all-round boxing specialist, Spencer Oliver. Spencer, good morning to you here on GB News. Welcome. Welcome to the show. Just talk to me about the fight this evening in terms of what it means for Anthony Joshua. Is it fair, as I mentioned to the guys here, that it's all or nothing really for Anthony Joshua, isn't it? If he wins, then suddenly the commercial viability of the Fury fight is back in play. If he loses, then people are starting to wonder where next.
100%. You know, we've been out here in Saudi Arabia since Monday. We've been around both guys, and yeah, listen, there's a lot on the line for Anthony Joshua. It means a lot for him. Victory is a must here, really. I mean, I had a good chat with him. I had a good chat with him earlier on in the week, and you know, there's been a lot of speculation about whether he will retire or not if he loses his contest. Well, one thing I can tell you guys is he's definitely got no thoughts of retirement if he loses this fight. He said he will just go back to the drawing board. He wants to become a freeweight world champion, and if he doesn't do it this time, he will do it again. But you know, I think from a market point of view, a valuability point of view, it's a must-win. We all want to see that fight, that undisputed title fight with Tyson Fury. We know he's still got the WBC belt. He's got until 26th of August to decide whether he's going to give that up or not. And the only reason he hasn't given that up yet is because I believe he's waiting to see the outcome of this contest. And obviously he wants Anthony Joshua to win this contest. Joshua recognised that he needed to change things, so he decided to pack his bags, go over to the States, look for a new trainer, because he knows that he's got to add something to his locker to win this contest. He's found Mikey Garcia, and they seem to have gelled very well together. You know, I've seen them doing little workouts this week, and I've got to tell you guys, expect the unexpected. Anthony Joshua, his style has changed slightly, and he's got a game plan going into this one, and it's not going to be the game plan that you saw before where he tried to outbox the best boxer in the world. He's going to roll the dice. He's going to go for this one. I think that he recognises he needs to close the space on Usyk. He can't allow him to control the pace. He's going to use his strength, his size, his explosive power. I'm expecting fireworks here, but we're not going to get the same fight as we did last time.
Spencer, I was listening to one of your colleagues, Gareth A. Davis, and he said he's got to get in there early. He's got to impose his size on the much smaller Usyk, a 22-pound difference between the two at the weigh-in yesterday, I believe. It's not as simple as that, though, against the calibre of opponent like Usyk.
No, it certainly isn't. You know, Usyk is the best pound-for-pound boxer in the world, and when you're the best pound-for-pound boxer in the world, that means that you've got so much in your arsenal. Like, he controls the space. He makes a fighter work when he doesn't want to work, you know, and we saw that last time. I think what Anthony Joshua done wrong last time was that he went in there thinking that he had to turn up to win. He didn't recognise how good Usyk was. Joshua thought he was going to be too big, and he said to me, you know what, Spence, what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to outbox this guy. I'm going to outbox this guy and show people that I can actually box as well as just knock people out. After 3 or 4 rounds, he recognised he couldn't do it, but Usyk was into a rhythm, and he could not break that rhythm. So I think Joshua going into this one will give Usyk so much more respect, but so Gareth's right in what he says, you know, Joshua needs to get in there, he needs to control the pace, and he needs to rough Usyk up on the inside. I spoke to Evander Holyfield this week as well, and I said to him, you know, how did you overcome that first fight with Riddick Bowe when you lost and then you beat him in the return, in that amazing trilogy that you had? And he said, well, what you got to do is, he was the bigger guy, and in the first fight, when we was getting close, he was tying me up, he wasn't allowing me to work. And that's what Joshua's got to do. When things are not going his way, he's got to impose his weight, his size, lean on Usyk, make things difficult for him, not let him get into a rhythm. But like I said, I'm expecting something different. I've seen Joshua's working more on head movement, working more on doubling up on the jab, using his reach, and more importantly, working on body shots. Alexander Usyk is a guy, not a lot of people will know this, but he's been down 3 times in his life against 3 different opponents, all in his amateur days, and they were all with body shots. He doesn't like it up the body, and I think AJ's been recognised that as well. He's been working the body, so he has a game plan, and it's a different one to the first one. But obviously with Alexander Usyk, you know, he's come in tremendous condition as well. What's been going on, you know, out there with his country at war. He went to war for his country as well, you know, and he wants to give his country some hope. He wants to represent them. He tried to buy the TV rights for this fight, by the way, and the Saudis very kindly gifted it to him so that his whole country can watch him. You know, he wants to give them some hope, so he's come with an unbelievable determination to win this contest as well. We're going to see fireworks, guys, that's for sure. It's going to be something very, very spectacular. I've been to the venue yesterday as well. It looks amazing. 10,000 people sold out to 60 different countries.
Spence, I'm going to have to stop you there for now, but thanks very much indeed for your analysis.
Yeah,
and,
for talking it up. My goodness,
exactly.
Fireworks tonight.
Thanks very much
brilliant.
indeed. We hope it's the fireworks
guys.
you're expecting. It promises to be a fantastic match-up, and there is that political element to it
Yeah,
as well.
that's interesting. It's a Brit versus a Ukrainian, obviously, and as we heard there, Ukrainians are going to be able to watch it for free.
Guess how
what
much
about Brits?
£27. It's a lot of money.
All those Ukrainian people who found sanctuary in Britain, they're going to have to pay out.
Unless they can find a dodgy feed somewhere, yeah. But oh no, they don't.
No,
they
not
don't
that you
exist.
would advocate that. No. Absolutely.
Thank you
Well,
very
we'll
much
see.
indeed for that. Indeed.
What time will it go live?
Well, it was.
7 onwards, is it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the one thing about Saudi is that the timing's a little bit more kinder to a British audience. However, it's still an undercard to go through. One worry is the atmosphere. Sometimes when you see these fights in the Middle East, and it's not really a boxing public over there. You see a little bit of a lame atmosphere in compared to what you get at, say, Wembley or Old Trafford.
No, we're going to see fireworks.
Yeah, fireworks. I think he's talking about in the ring. I'm hoping he means outside as well. It should be good.
Hopefully, yeah.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
And isn't it great the way he was talking? It was all action,
yeah,
wasn't it?
that's what you have. See, that's what you don't get with me. He's been in the ring many times as a European champion, so you don't get the movement with me.
Brilliant, brilliant. We're going to see a bit later on in the programme.
Absolutely, yes.
Jolly good. We'll talk more sport then. Right now, let's get ready for this morning's newspapers in just a couple of moments.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast here on GB News with Anne and Mark. Time for a look at the newspapers, I think. We're joined by Claire Muldoon and James Woodhousen. And we've got lots to look through. Should we start with you, James? In the Telegraph, Starmer faces Brexit rebellion from pro-Europe left-wingers. Oh, my goodness. Can you translate?
Well, Starmer is under attack from momentum, although they don't seem to have...
Corbynistas, I should say, yeah.
Yeah, they don't seem to have much momentum. Like the Labour Party, in fact, just yesterday or the day before, the Telegraph had a report that 90,000 members have left the Labour Party out of about 500,000, that they're £5 million in debt. When they were,
the party itself?
Yeah, when they were £1 million in debt. And I'm delighted to see that the Labour Party, I think, is on its last legs. And for people to claim that they're left-wing in wanting to get back into the EU, I challenge them to name maybe 10 EU commissioners. I've just looked it up, and if anybody follows my tweets, I don't know any of them. And the reason is you can't vote for them. So if you want to be left-wing, you've got to be democratic. If you want to be democratic, you've got to hold English, Scottish, Welsh and Northern Irish politicians to account, rather than just hope that the whims of unelected Eurocrats should decide policy. So I think they're on a losing wicket, these Momentum people. I should point out that their ilk, like Norwich South MP Clive Lewis, attacked the Assistant General Secretary of the RMT, Eddie Dempsey, for being pro-Brexit and indeed for being a racist, I believe. This is the kind of factional disputes in the Labour Party where you attack people who are Democrats as gammon.
However, when we look at the Times, which has come out one of the latest polls, in terms of Westminster voting intentions, Labour in the lead at 43%, to Conservatives on 28%. A survey of about 60 or 1,700 British adults between August the 16th and 17th. That's some lead.
Yes, but I think we should always remember Neil Kinnock and his ability to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. You know, I mean, they're so weak, the leadership of the Labour Party, just like the left of the Labour Party. Of course, everybody hates the Tories, especially, and they will more and more with the cost of living crisis.
But they'll flail around looking for somebody else to vote for.
I'm not sure what they'll do. I think, you know, Liz Truss doesn't have the balls of Margaret Thatcher, to coin a phrase, and Keir Starmer doesn't have the balls of an Aaron Bevan or anybody like that. And nor does
Well, you're
the
looking a long way back there anyway,
Yeah,
aren't you?
but Bevan, I didn't agree with him. He's too right-wing for me, but at least he knew what he stood for, and Churchill respected him for that.
And came from a working-class background.
That's right. And, you know, the Labour Party has the same brand name, but it's not what it was in Bevan's day. It's completely different. It's a party of the universities, of the middle class, of the small and medium enterprises that are important to the country. It was never a working class party. It was formed by the trade union bureaucracy around 1900. And the trade union bureaucracy, with some notable and great exceptions like Mick Lynch, has generally swung behind the pro-Brussels line of the Labour Party. I don't know what they're quarrelling about, these Momentum people, because Starmer would like to get back in the EU. He just knows that it's not a winning policy.
Do you think some of our viewers might have
A view?
Yeah.
GB Views at gbnews.uk.
If we got enough paper left in the printer.
Yes, please, absolutely. Meanwhile, Claire, let's look at university students. Possibly dropping out simply because they haven't got the money to continue.
Yeah, well, this is from the National Union of Students, and they're saying because of the cost of living rising, how on earth, and rents actually, student rents have risen from an average of £4,500 to £7,000. Now, my youngest just got his A-level results and he's stuck in clearing. He's one of the 50,000 that I warned last week that didn't actually work hard enough, because although the places are there, other people are getting them just because they did better in their exams.
So is the clearing process actually happening right now?
It is happening right now.
So he is literally on the end of a phone or a laptop or whatever, waiting for somebody to offer.
Well, yes, but we're also waiting on remarks, because what you have to do is, if you get the paper back and there's a couple of marks inches away from, we need the points, right? We need the points or the grades, because some universities only offer on grades, some only offer on points, right? So we're in this dilemma. If he had actually worked harder, instead of going down to the cricket plains, you know, it might be a different
come on,
story.
That's unfair for
no,
his
it's
mum to
not
say that on
unfair.
telly.
He did not work hard enough, right?
Does he accept that?
I think he does now. He sees all his mates getting their first choice.
No, it's gone on national television.
But that's... our viewers know my view on children, right, and know what they should be doing. But look, next week we've got the GCSE results. The Telegraph, record high GCSE appeals expected as grades set to fall. Students could drop out due to lack of cash. It's not looking good for them. It's really not.
And the other thing is, Claire, that once they finish, which my son has, He's
The
then
amount of
got a
debt.
student debt, 6.6% interest every year.
Mark.
Twice the mortgage rate. What are they doing?
Mark, that's Student Finance England. You go to Scotland, you don't have that.
No, I know.
Unless you're English or Welsh.
Going to
or Northern Irish going to Scotland. If you're European, still free. If you're Scottish, still free. You know, it's not fair, and I've said this a myriad of times. But look, they've been
saying
through...
Nicola Sturgeon is discriminating against English and Welsh?
I always say that. I'm not a Nicola Sturgeon fan at all, as our viewers will also know. But anyway, students could drop out due to lack of cash. The National Union of Students want to get the government to give them extra money for bursaries. Where is this money coming from? The government has no money left. Right, it's going to be tough for them, as if it wasn't tough enough where this A-level cohort didn't actually sit any formal examinations because their GCSE were teacher approved. They are now going, at least they've got classes to go to, unlike the previous 2 years of university students where everything was online.
If you were lucky. But wouldn't you?
And you're still paying for it.
If you were going to be the next Conservative Prime Minister, wouldn't you get industry and bang their heads together and say, I want a complete rollout of new apprenticeships. I want loads of really good apprenticeships.
Absolutely.
Now,
or even
it could be
sponsored
done
university places as well.
So it could be done straight away.
But that would require the Tories to be interested in manufacturing and production, and none of them have a background or an interest.
Or it goes back to Blair, the knowledge-based economy.
Yeah, well, they thought, Peter Mandelson thought, he wrote a book or a pamphlet called Living on Thin Air, which completely idolised IT, which, as we know from the morning's discussion on Apple, can go wrong from time to time.
And you've still got to make stuff.
Yeah, you've still got to make stuff. You've got to extract stuff. You've got to farm. And they're not interested in that. They're interested in their careers and in property, in the law and in public relations. That's their background. And the same with Labour, largely.
And is that why Germany's so much better than us? They actually like and are quite good at making things.
Well, yeah,
the engineering
but
and the
Scholz is, if you're reading the papers, Scholz is really catching a cold on corruption and funny business at the moment. I mean, that's a different issue, but Germany takes apprenticeships seriously, and energy.
And they still make things, like you said.
Yeah, but we've always been a nation that made things.
Used to be.
What's going on? James, tell us about the RAF investigating positive discrimination.
Well, I had to laugh. You know, I'm no fan of military action by Britain abroad. I think it's always been and always will be disastrous. But if you are going to have a military apparatus, it needs to be able to fight. And I'm no fan of James Heappey, the Armed Forces Minister, but he's backed plans by senior Air Force chiefs to look at ways they could legally boost diversity targets, but he's against positive discrimination. Now, what does that exactly mean? And then there's a spokesman who says, in the RAF, training to clarify the difference between positive action and positive discrimination is delivered to all recruiting staff. What the heck are they talking about? Isn't it important to have a fighting force rather than going on about this wordplay?
Did you also see the suggestion that there was an internal email that they wanted an RAF frontline pilot to go to the Top Gun cinema, was it Leicester Square, where they had the premiere, but basically indicating that they would preferably want a female and maybe from an ethnic minority to actually present the new face of the RAF. And then, of course, they said, actually, we haven't got any female ethnic minority frontline pilots. That's the problem.
Yeah, well, you know, can you tell me which US president, maybe you can, Claire, which US president first opened the door to positive discrimination in the United States?
It's probably Donald Trump.
Nope. Warm.
No, that was a bit ironic, I have to say.
That's warm.
It was George Bush?
No, Tricky Dicky.
Oh, Richard Nixon.
Yeah. You know, people just, you know, positive discrimination sounds great, you know, but Putin reads the papers. Xi Jinping reads the papers. If I'm them reading, oh, well, we want diversity at Leicester Square, you know, I'm thinking they're not going to be very good in a tank,
haven't got their priorities
Not
right,
because women are already involved in frontline positions in the army here and elsewhere.
More waste and wokery in the NHS, Claire, you find it
Of course, front page Daily Mail. After what we were talking about A&E, warned not to go to A&E because we've got a crisis blowing. NHS blows £1 million. This has been the past 3 years on woke groups for staff. Now, I'm affronted by this on two levels. One, the amount of hours, over almost 110,000 hours have been spent giving classes in wokery, the LGBT party and other woke events over the last 3 years. And in fact, the figure is set to be a lot more, as only at least a half of the trusts have actually given the information under the Freedom of Information Act, right? 110,000 hours in the NHS from admin and clinicians' point of view. Do you know how many patients' appointments could be made?
Absolutely.
Do you know how many patients could be seen? Do you know how many waiting lists could be cut? Yeah. It's appalling.
And
Absolutely
this was
appalling.
Point in the Hustings last night about asked what we do about the NHS, and she pointed out about the bureaucracy that she said needed to be actually...
Get rid of it. Yeah. Get rid of it. I'm a patient at the Royal Brompton Hospital, which has saved my life, and it is an amazing hospital, a fabulous trust. I walked in there for a scan in March of this year. Everyone was masked up. The clinicians weren't even around because there was no... The appointments with your consultant are still on Zoom. You go to the test you go up to the hospital for the actual tests. The CEO or the chief advisor of the trust, there was a picture, a plaque being unveiled because he was leaving. I've never seen so many managers and doctors standing around.
Yeah.
Quite right.
And I was quite vocal in my, vitriol against it because I'm affronted. I said, oh, sorry, have I walked into a clinic that I didn't know was on? Am I disturbing you?
Yeah.
Oh, no, here's a nice picture.
Whenever we talk about the NHS, though, and anecdotes like that, which infuriate, there is also an awfully good side. Why is it so different in different places? I mean, I've been with the NHS just recently, and I've never been so impressed by the staff.
Yeah, that's true.
They've been absolutely marvellous and ready to give appointments and all the rest of it. So how come you get a totally different picture wherever you
I hate to mention the word on GB News, but isn't something about this to do with class? I mean, when I talk to ambulance men, they're terrific and they work really, really hard. When I hear about the unveiling a plaque and the management, I think they're on another planet. And, I've been to a trust meeting. I wasn't allowed to speak because that's not the way they run trust meetings. And broadly, they just lorded it over people. They're much more interested in bullying and diversity than patient care. And
they should be interested in bullying and diversity.
Yeah,
but it comes down to common sense. You shouldn't
exactly
have to spend all of those hours.
What did you say? The common sense?
Yeah, I know.
Common sense. It's 2022 we're living in, Anne. But that's gone right out the window.
Who hasn't got the common sense? You walk into any NHS ward or whatever, the nurses have got common sense.
Exactly.
The doctors have got common sense.
I should say I know a nurse, and she told me she was once ushered up into the top management floor and so on, and they're counting the beds by pushing little wooden beds.
Oh, really?
Like in the Second World War. Yeah. So before we rush to say, they're paid too much, nurses, they actually get much more and so on. What are these people doing?
Yeah.
Have they never heard of IT? But there they are doing stuff 70 years back,
Right.
Makes you tear your hair out, doesn't it? I think we've got to leave it there because we've just run out of time. Thank you so much. We'll see you again. We'll see you again in about an hour. Yeah, absolutely. Stick with us.
I'm bored of my rap. Yeah.
Let's bring you up to date with the headlines, shall we? More travel disruption, I'm afraid, expected today as union members from 18 train companies walk out. Only 20% of rail network is said to be running, with some parts of the country having no trains running at all. Train services on Sunday will be affected by the aftermath of Saturday's strike action.
Back to the politics, with former Chancellor Rishi Sunak saying he would ban new smart motorways to end what he called a war on motorists, describing them as unsafe. He plans to stop them being made while improving existing roads. He's also pledged to prevent rogue parking fines, as he called them, and review low-traffic neighbourhoods over concerns they've led to difficulties for emergency vehicles. Just some of the pledges he hopes can help him win the Tory leadership. The Hustings last night in Manchester.
A member of the so-called Islamic State terror cell known as the Beatles has been jailed for life after being convicted for his role in the murder of American hostages. He actually grew up in London. He was one of a gang of 4 Islamist militants branded the Beatles due to their British accents. He was given a life sentence for each of the 8 counts he was convicted of back in April.
Nurses are to start wearing new smart glasses, which hopefully we'll see. They are to maximise time with patients on home visits. Now, the virtual reality style goggles not like these. Part of a new NHS trial to transcribe appointments directly to electronic records, all to reduce time spent on admin tasks, which we've just been speaking about, of course. The smart glasses to be trialled at the Northern Lincolnshire Goole NHS Foundation Trust from next week.
A week of rail strikes headed by Network Rail, that today will see just 20% of UK train services running, means that countless travellers, commuters and tourists are having to make alternative plans. With 45,000 workers taking to the picket line, we're joined right now by our Scotland reporter, Davy Donaldson, who's live from Waverley Station in... Oh, we haven't got him, I'm afraid.
No, he's cancelled. There's a strike on.
Well, that's true. Maybe he couldn't even get there. I suppose. We'll bring you up to date anyway a bit later on with exactly how the train strikes, bus strikes and everything else
Not great at Edinburgh, because there's a certain thing called the Fringe Festival on, of course, and people might be able to get to them, but not getting back tonight. 6:30 the train's
last
finished?
train was at 5:30.
Or 5:30, even earlier. So anyway, we'll catch up with Edinburgh, find out what's going on there.
Now, let's talk about something that we were hinting at yesterday. For all the latest on things royal, we're joined by Sarah Robertson, who's royal entertainment reporter at the Sunday Mirror. Royal and entertainment, I guess.
Do both go together, one wonders?
I think both. We were talking a lot yesterday about Lady Louise Windsor, who is the daughter of the Sussexes. That's...
Wessexes.
Wessexes, sorry, yes. That is Sophie and Prince Edward. That's correct. And the fact that whilst she's been waiting for her A-level results, she's done what ordinary kids do, which is a sort of weekend Saturday-type job at a garden centre. How refreshing.
It is refreshing, Anne, you're completely right. Yes, it was exposed in the Sun newspaper this week that Lady Louise has actually been pulling her sleeves up, getting stuck into the compost, potting plants, serving customers at a garden centre local to her home at Bagshot Park, which is where she's been brought up. She's getting ready to go off to St Andrews University, but how lovely to see, you know, a young member of the royal family doing a summer job, which all of us, it's a rite of passage, really, after your A-levels. I know my mum straight away. There was no being lazy bones, lying in, you know, had to get up and have a Saturday job and, you know, earn some money. And it's nice to see that Lady Louise is, you know, doing, as you say, what ordinary children are doing.
Apparently one of the customers at the garden centre said, how lovely, but you don't expect to see, you don't expect to be buying your begonias from the Queen's grandchild. And I thought that was a lovely way of putting it. She's actually 16th in line to the throne, I gather.
That's correct, yes, she is, obviously following on from the other royals in front of her. But it's such a lovely quote, what that customer said, and it's true. Like, if you're going to buy your flowers, you would not expect to see, you know, this young lady serving you.
Fair to say that the Wessexes are seen to be rather more grounded than perhaps other members of the royal family, that as parents they've obviously done quite well with their kids.
Yes, I think so. They've sort of kept a bit of more of a back seat, shall we say. But the thing is now that Lady Louise, you know, she's 18, she's going off to university, she's coming into her own. She seems such a lovely young lady, like when we've seen her talking about her grandfather, Prince Philip. You know, she's following in his footsteps, doing the carriage driving, which is wonderful. But also, I think as well, she's really now being seen as quite a weapon, a secret weapon in the royal family's armoury, because of her conduct and how she presents herself and
showing others
herself.
how to... the other point is, I mean, she's going to St Andrews to study English, which, of course, is where Wills met Kate.
That's correct, yes. Following in her cousin...
By royal appointment.
Yeah, and her cousin William's footsteps. A very prestigious university. I went to Aberdeen, not St Andrews, but very, very, very good university.
She had to pay for university fees, though, won't she?
Because she's an English person going to a Scottish...
Yeah, if you're Scottish, you don't have to, but obviously, because she's English, she will.
Well spotted.
But, yeah, I think compared to some of the other royal members of the family, shall we say, Meghan Markle, not naming names.
Sorry?
Meghan. You know, Lady Louise is keeping shall we say, a low profile, but just getting on with it. And she obviously wants to carve her own identity with no fuss. That's exactly the way to put it.
And I gather today it's 30 years since the Duchess of York's toe-sucking scandal.
What a contrast to Lady Louise.
30 years, it doesn't seem like a day.
I know.
I'm trying to think who he was. He was a financier, wasn't he?
John Bryan, Texan multimillionaire. Yes.
And apparently,
a swimming pool.
Apparently, the whole incident, as you know, the whole incident was particularly distressing for Prince Philip. He found the whole thing so embarrassing. He didn't really want anything more to do with her.
He was furious. He literally choked on his porridge. I mean, Fergie herself wrote in her own biography, you know, the porridge went cold when the papers were presented in the Balmoral breakfast room. It's, as I say, 30 years to the day. And, I mean, that story at the time just caused ructions through the royal family.
And was it fair to say she was ostracised from then on? He just literally wouldn't be in the same room as her?
Philip, whenever she came to Balmoral with the girls, because the Queen always, I think, had a bit of a soft touch when it came to Fergie. The Queen was a bit more tolerant and forgiving than her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, was, but the Duke would always be away at the Isle of Wight sailing, so he would time it that he would avoid Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, at all costs. And the only time they were reconciled was when it was Eugenie's wedding, and then obviously he had to be in the same vicinity as her.
I love the idea of them all sitting there at this sort of very posh breakfast table, and then the papers get delivered. Slam on the table and think the porridge goes cold.
Princess Diana at the time sent a page message on the pager to her trusted confidant Richard Kay saying the redhead's in trouble, and that came through late the night before, so they must have had some sort of pre-warning what was happening. And Fergie took the two girls and fled back to Surrey, so to avoid the actual showdown
Sunningdale,
with...
wasn't it? Where they were
yes, that's correct.
Right.
Yes.
30 years ago, my goodness.
Gosh, how time flies.
But things don't change, funnily enough.
Not at all.
Right, do stick with us. Thanks very much indeed. Do
Thank
stay with
you.
us, because in just a couple of moments we'll be bringing you bang up to date with all of the latest headlines, of course, including all the details of those strikes. Stick with us.
Hello, I'm Esther Akbay. And I'm Philip Davis. Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GBNews.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, the two Tory leadership candidates are head-to-head, but not eye-to-eye. They lay out their vision for the future, really, on what a future Britain looks like in a post-Boris Johnson era.
More on that coming up in a moment, but a very good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock now on Saturday, the 20th of August. You're watching Breakfast on GB News with Anne and Mark this morning.
And as ever, we're live across the whole of the UK on both your TV and your radio. Wherever you are, you can take us with you. Shall we tell you what's in store for you this morning?
Go on then.
Well, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak they were telling last night, a packed crowd of Conservative voters in Manchester what vision they have for Britain after Boris Johnson leaves office. Both candidates were put on the spot by GB News' Alistair Stewart. Liz Truss said she wanted the private sector to grow more than the public sector, whilst Rishi Sunak said government isn't here to do everything for people.
And then Michael Gove revealed he's endorsed Rishi Sunak for the leadership, saying that the Truss campaign had been a holiday from reality and that he did not accept the SW1 consensus that Liz Truss had already won.
Now, are NHS workers deserting the profession to become adult entertainers? Just watch this.
Hi guys, my name's James Cowie. I quit my job a year and a half ago to become a full-time OnlyFans creator when before I worked as a healthcare assistant for 6 years.
Well, we'll be speaking to that young man later in the programme about why he's joined the website where people pay for adult content from other users.
Let's hope he's got his clothes on by then. Have you ever heard of the slang term Karen? If you haven't, well, apparently it's used by some as a term for an angry, entitled white woman. And now you can be served by Karen too by going along to one of her diners in the UK.
And that Liz Truss, yeah, she was in last week. I couldn't believe it. She said that I needed to graft more. She didn't even leave a tip.
Misha.
Yes?
You've got 2 minutes to the interview. You need to hurry up.
Do I really need to do this interview?
Yes, you do.
Ah!
Well, once she's off the phone, Karen will be joining us here on Breakfast this morning. Don't miss that.
No, something to look forward to.
Yeah, if you're Karen at home,
Talked at by somebody like that.
Yeah, it's not us.
Yeah, if you're a real bona fide Karen, I do beg your pardon about that, but we'll be talking about it and why Karen is called Karen a bit later on. Do email us with your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Well, here's interesting. The former Levelling Up Secretary, Michael Gove, has thrown his support behind Rishi Sunak now in the Conservative leadership contest. And he's accusing Liz Truss of taking what he called a holiday from reality with her tax plans.
Yes, that attack on the former cabinet colleague coming as the Tory leadership hopefuls set out their vision for the country at another round of Hustings in Manchester last night, hosted by GB News' Alistair Stewart, no less.
The former Chancellor backed Miss Truss's plan to we apparently attack striking workers, or at least address their problems, and pledged to get inflation under control.
Meanwhile, the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss saying there should be league tables for police forces and suggesting that retired medics could be asked to help clear the COVID backlog for the NHS. Let's take a look at some of the highlights from last night.
What is the Sunak vision of how Britain should be through Conservative eyes?
Government can't do everything, but more than that, government shouldn't do everything. We are Conservatives. We believe in personal responsibility. We believe in families. We believe in communities. And yes, COVID happened, but that is not the norm. We've got to be willing to actually just make the argument, because all the pressure is always there. And as that's what you've seen over the last 2 years, that's not me. I don't wake up every morning and when a problem comes my way think, oh, well, how can the government spend some money to solve this problem? That is wrong. That's not what a Conservative government should do, and that is not what I will do as Prime Minister.
My ambition is for the private sector to grow more than the public sector. And one of the problems I think we've got is there's been an assumption by various members of what I call the economic orthodoxy that Britain is a low-growth country, and therefore everything is static. We have to make sure that we are taxing people to keep up with public spending. That is not my vision. I believe we can get to much higher growth. I want the private sector to be bigger compared to the public sector, and I want a sustainable public sector. You know, we have far too many quangos in this country. We have 500 of them. We need to trim it down to size, and we need to make the government efficient.
I am winning the argument about tackling inflation, being responsible with our borrowing, about actually supporting vulnerable people this autumn and winter, which my plan will do, Liz's plan does not do, about actually reforming our tax system so it delivers growth.
We do need to make sure our police are policing the streets rather than policing Twitter and focusing on the right crimes the public are concerned about. See, what I would do is have league tables that compare police forces and how they are performing so they can really be held to account by the public.
Well, that was what happened actually during the sort of debate bit of the hustings. But it's always interesting what happens afterwards as well, and who you can catch to talk to about it and get a real opinion. Well, GB News' political correspondent Tom Harwood managed to do that because he caught up with Sir Graham Brady, who's the chairman of the 1922 committee, and asked him how the Tory leadership hopefuls are looking so far.
What a couple of hours of debate, fantastic, incisive questioning, of course, not just from Alistair, but from the wonderful, wonderful audience here in Manchester as well. I'm standing just outside the auditorium here. We're going to be seeing a lot of people filtering out. We're going to be getting a lot of views from the audience, hopefully from some people that asked questions as well as those that didn't. But before we get into the punters in the audience, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by the chairman of the 1922 committee, the returning officer, indeed, Sir Graham Brady. Sir Graham, I know you have to be studiously neutral in this contest, but just from that observer's position, how is this contest going? Is it going in the way you expected it to?
Well, I was just really happy to be there. It was a great evening, really good presentations from both the candidates, some good rigorous questioning. And I could say one of the debates that goes on, people say, is this too long a contest or not? And I confess that if anything, I would have liked a shorter contest. But here we are 4 weeks in, and we've got 1,400 Conservative members here in Manchester coming to hear the two candidates, put them through their paces. I'm starting to think this is actually a very good thing.
A lot of people are saying that it's a bit repetitive, that this process was potentially too truncated in that first week, that we whittled through all the many candidates that the Conservative MPs had the opportunity to see. Potentially some members would have liked to see some more names through to that final ballot. What do you make of those criticisms of your process?
Well, it's not my process. We have a constitution of the party. It gives the 1922 committee a duty, which is to provide two candidates that will go to the party members. So, of course, some people say we'd rather have had 3 or 6 or whatever number. That is what we're charged with doing. We did it in a good, rigorous and efficient process. It took 8 days from start to end. And I think pretty much all of my colleagues, as far as I'm aware, all of my colleagues in Parliament, think we did a good job. We ran a good, free and fair process. And today's evidence, we got 2 very good candidates out for the party and the country to choose between.
We had a very interesting view earlier on saying, OK, well, all right, they're the 2 candidates we've got, but wouldn't it have been rather nicer to see 2 up-and-coming new blood, really? And what we've actually got now is a choice between people who've actually been in Cabinet for a while themselves anyway.
And maybe to blame, some people may say,
for the problems that we're facing, yeah. Thank you for getting in touch. Sheila in Edinburgh said, I thought yesterday's hustings was the best, and that Alistair Stewart was really responsible, very professional, and gave the impression that he wanted everyone to be included in the discussion without talking down to viewers.
Steve from Cleethorpes, good morning, and lovely to see your smiling faces. Have we been smiling?
Trying to,
all the doom and gloom. Anyway, read the political stuff this morning and have sent off my vote, so last night was pretty interesting. But Liz still has it, and that's where my vote went. Cleethorpes going for Liz Truss. There we go.
Yeah, another point I found very interesting, and I find it really difficult to read out sometimes. This comes from Kenny. Why are those terrorists referred to as the Beatles? If I were Paul McCartney or Ringo Starr, I'd be really offended because it is a slur on their names. I quite agree.
Yeah.
I know they were called that.
By the hostages themselves.
Yes,
that was their
because
shorthand.
There were 4 of them and they had British accents. But I think I think the media should stop calling them that. I really do.
Well, now that they've been...
Well, they're a bunch of terrorists, and the worst sort of terrorists you can imagine. So I think we should forget that they were called the Beatles.
Yeah. We've talked about water, of course. Just some bit of breaking news coming through from Southern Water. Yet more sewage being released on the Sussex coast. East Sussex this morning, Hastings, Norman's Bay, along there. And we've got here a note from Greg. I'll be water saving when they start plugging the leaks. They haven't bothered to plug. Utility companies should never have been privatised, especially seeing as most of their investors are in other countries, as we've touched on, and not really concerned about the UK water service they are supposed to provide, obviously. That from Greg.
Yeah, another one from Sue said, good morning to Anne and Mark. I wonder if either of you can remember seeing a programme on TV about a system that was designed to repair water pipes quickly and cheaply.
Well, yes.
It sort of rings a bell with me. She says it was a sort of liner pipe that was inserted into the old pipe, which was then inflated and hardened. And if my memory serves me right, that would be a quick, cheaper way of stopping all these leaks in the water system without digging up all the roads to do it.
One would think so. And I'm going to sort of drop a personal note in here. I've got a problem with one of my drains from the kitchen. Found out that the pipe had actually fractured or partially collapsed. And they were talking about a liner, but that was more expensive because of I think it's Kevlar that it's made of, than actually digging it up and putting a new section of pipe in. So one would think easier to do, but I think obviously it's quite expensive to get the correct type of liner to put through.
Clearly, I mean, one would trust that the water companies would be addressing the leaks in that way if that were viable, if there were a cheap, easy way to do it.
Yeah.
But if you're,
but the point
what you're saying is you have to dig up.
But
that
also
requires...
the fact that it's cheaper for them to pay fines when they're releasing sewage or the other things that they're not supposed to do than actually invest the money in the infrastructure.
I can't see why fines would help the situation in any way at all. Because if a water company or whatever is made to pay a huge fine, inevitably they're going to pass the cost on to us, aren't they? Inevitably. If they could be made to actually take it from their boardroom members, from their pockets.
Their bonuses that they get on top of their enormous salaries.
If it came out of bonuses or something like that, that might be a little fairer. But just to make the company do it, they would do it in a way that inevitably would be passed on to us, don't you think?
Should we just touch on one more, bearing in mind what we brought you at the top of the programme, and this was a young man that we're going to be seeing more of later, hopefully not too much more in that particular sense. However, this is from Jerry in Cardiff. Morning all. Please refrain from stating that it's NHS staff who are leaving the profession to do adult work. Your wording infers or indicates it's nurses and doctors. It's not. It's unqualified staff. Cheers, Jerry in Cardiff.
And I don't think it's common. You know, I mean, we're interviewing this young man a bit later on because it's uncommon. We're not talking about thousands of people leaving the NHS to do this. It's just something... What is interesting is that he says he's earning more by doing what he's doing, which is on a so-called adult platform. He's earning more than he ever did as in a bona fide job in the NHS.
And but the sad thing is, he was actually looking after people with dementia. He was a dementia nurse.
Yeah.
So,
we'll ask him. I mean, we'll put that point to him. But it definitely isn't a huge, common thing that's happening within the NHS at the moment, I don't think.
Let's bring you up to date with the other headlines this morning, and more travel disruption, I'm afraid, expected. Union members from 18 train companies walking out today. Only 20% of rail network said to be up and running. Some parts of the country having no trains running at all. Well, the services on Sunday will be affected too by the aftermath of the strike action, of course, with trains being left in the wrong places. Again.
The former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, says he would ban new smart motorways to end what he calls a war on motorists. He's described them as unsafe and plans to stop them being made whilst improving existing roads. Sunak's also pledged to prevent rogue parking fines and review low-traffic neighbourhoods over concerns they've led to difficulties for emergency vehicles. They're just some of the pledges that he hopes can help him win the Tory leadership.
And the other headlines, a member of the so-called Islamic State terror cell known as the Beatles, that's the name the hostages gave them, has been jailed for life. He was convicted for his role in the murder of American hostages. Shafi al-Sheikh, who grew up in London, was one of a gang of 4 Islamist militants branded the Beatles due to their British accents. He was given a life sentence for each of the 8 counts he was convicted of back in April.
Well, lots more to come on the programme, including... Not including anything at the moment.
Just keeping you in suspense.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll be back with you in a couple of moments.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It is 8:18. If I speak slowly enough.
Spot on.
There you are. You're watching and listening to Breakfast
Beep, beep,
with
beep.
Mark and Anne.
Yes, very good morning to you this Saturday morning. Let's update you now with more strike action, because we're now talking about dockers who are due to strike at the port of Felixstowe in the east of England. It's the UK's largest container shipping port, and that's due to start tomorrow. It's over, yes, workers' pay, and due to last 8 days. It's likely to have a huge effect on the supply chain across Britain.
The Felixstowe Dock and Railway Company had offered workers a £500 lump sum on top of a 7% pay rise. But around 1,900 members of the Unite union have rejected that offer on the basis that it simply won't meet inflation rates.
Well, let's now speak to, I think, Robert Morton, who can join us, who's the national officer of the Unite union involved in this. Robert, thanks for speaking to us this morning. I gather that you've got a tabled offer of 7% plus a £500 lump sum. There may be many of those watching at home thinking, do you know, that's not a bad offer.
At the same time, there may be many at home thinking that it's not good enough. If you realise that the RPI is running now at 12.3%, if you accept 7%, then your standard of living goes down by 5.3%. And as for the £500, it's an insult, because if you do your maths and you take away the national insurance increase that the government have foisted upon us, and also the income tax, you end up roughly with just over £300. So it's a worthless offer as far as we are concerned.
Right, but you're not seriously asking for a 12.1% pay deal, are you? Because clearly, given what Rishi Sunak, for instance, has said about inflation, that's really going to add to our problems across the board.
No, what adds to our problems across the board are the profits that are being made by employers these days. And the employer we're talking about now, if you look at the last set of books that they presented to Companies House, you will find that they made £60 million profit and paid out over £90 million in dividends. This is what drives inflation, not the rise in wages. And the answer to your question is yes, I do expect an increase of 12%. Just yesterday, Unite the Union with two other companies realised wage increases of 13 and 12%. So yes, I do believe that it is working our strategy, and I expect this to happen at Felixstowe Docks too.
Just for the benefit of anyone watching and listening right now who isn't familiar with Felixstowe and the fact that it is what I think the UK's largest container shipping port, what is a 7-day, 8-day strike going to do? I mean, all of these ships won't be able to unload. Will they be able to come into port? What will happen?
No, they won't be able to come into the port. They won't be able to discharge. And we have connections all over the world. And what we are saying, we cannot have secondary action in this country, but we can have secondary action internationally. And that's what's going to happen to any ships involved in Felixstowe during this dispute. And the answer to your question is because of that, the supply line internationally will be severely disrupted.
Yeah, as you said, so you're almost taking your action international, aren't you?
Yes, that's the way dockers work. We have these anti-trade union laws that the Tories brought in, and I repeat myself, we can't do any secondary action here, but there's nothing to stop us doing it globally, and that's what we're going to do.
Do you accept the charge that's put against the unions that you're actually behaving a little selfishly, that you've got to realise the state that the country is in and that sacrifices have to be made by all workers, and a lot of people in the private sector haven't got the union muscle to try and get these sorts of deals, and that, 12.1% would be irresponsible given what we're being told about inflation?
Well, no, it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be irresponsible whatsoever. And I just wish that one of the newscasters would ask of the employers the same question. I've spent a week appearing on TV and radio answering the questions that you put to me, but we hear absolutely nothing from the employers, who are making what I would call obscene profit. And I've got a message for them. When you can pay, you should do so.
OK, we'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today. That strike due to start tomorrow, lasting 8 days and affecting container ships, as are saying that Felixstowe is the UK's biggest container shipping port.
Yeah, and we will actually try and put that point that Robert made to the company involved. As Robert was saying, his understanding is 60 million in profits, 90 million in dividends paid to the shareholders of the Felixstowe Dock and Railway Company, and we'll update you on that.
OK, do stay with us. In a couple of moments, we'll be looking through the Saturday papers.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GBNews.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning again. Thank you very much for being in touch. We've got some fantastic views coming in, very interesting. The young man on OnlyFans. Now, this is somebody we've been talking about that is going to be on the programme a bit later. He was working in the National Health Service, and as you're saying, he was doing dementia care, wasn't he? He's now put himself on this website, which I hadn't heard of until yesterday, where you can... I don't know, you interact with other people who are also on the website.
As it were.
They ask you to do stuff and we'll pay you to do it. Anyway, so
like
Graham says... Well, yeah. No, actually.
Can we keep our clothes on?
Yeah, Graham says, dear good morning, good... GB News, sorry. The young man on OnlyFans, the success span on OnlyFans is extremely short. It only acts as a gateway into prostitution. Excuse the pun, however, the material he produces now will only come back to bite him in the bum later in life.
Right. Good morning, team, says Philip in Staffordshire. The young chap you're going to give airtime to promote his new venture obviously had no passion or vocation for his role in the NHS and is better off out of it. That's from Phil in Staffordshire.
Yeah.
Not impressed.
No, absolutely. And then on the subject of calling those terrorists the Beatles, which we've made the point that it was actually what the hostages themselves called them, because they were 4 young men and they all had British accents. And as we've heard, one has now been sentenced to 8 life sentences. And he was brought up in London, for heaven's sake. But a lot of people, like me, have always been really worried about the fact that the media continue to call them the Beatles, even though we do point out that that's what they were known as. Lindsay in Derbyshire says the same. Thank you so much for pointing out the ridiculous naming of terrorists as our best-loved music group. I was about to write in myself about this. I grimace every time I see them called as such. It's the newspaper's fault for printing it. It is actually a fact that that's what they were called.
And Sean, absolutely, Anne, the media must stop using that nickname for brutal killers, especially when our lovely Liverpool lads were all about...
Love and peace.
Love and peace.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
They were.
Yeah. It would be interesting to listen to Ringo Starr and Paul McCartney get their view on that, because clearly it goes again... And there's the irony, I suppose. Maybe those hostages were thinking, no, these guys aren't about love and peace in any way whatsoever. So
we were also talking a bit earlier about the fact that, the 2 candidates who are up for the Prime Ministership are previous Cabinet colleagues, although they clearly didn't get on that well. And maybe it would have been nice to see some fresh young blood. Hi, GB News team, says Helen in Ledbury. I'm sorry, Anne, if you've inexperienced people going into the Prime Minister's job, the civil servants and advisors would eat them alive. The Prime Minister does need to have some cabinet experience so that they can effectively and strongly navigate the crocodile-infested swamp that is Whitehall. Great show, she says, best regards.
And Kenneth adds to that. Good morning. The 2 final candidates for PM were chosen by Parliament, not by the electorate members of the party. Good point, it was the MPs. This is why there is anger. It should be our choice of candidates, not MPs. They seem to forget they are there to serve us. Kenneth, I suspect a member of the Conservative Party writing in with that point.
Shall we take a look at what the newspapers are saying today? Quick whiz through the front pages. The Times reports on how the former Cabinet Minister Michael Gove has backed ex-Chancellor Rishi Sunak to be the next Conservative leader. He also adds that he plans to step away from frontline politics.
On to The Guardian, it goes with a line on the Tory leadership frontrunner Liz Truss, who personally supported the NHS cuts back in a 2009 article, arguing that the health service could not be put on a pedestal.
And it's a cost of living crisis on the front page of The Independent, as 1 in 7 small firms fear they're going to have to downsize or shut down.
Telegraph goes with the NHS launching a campaign urging the public to avoid A&E as the winter crisis bites, yes, in August.
Yes, well, let's go through what's inside the papers as well right now with our wonderful newspaper reviewers, Claire Muldoon and James Woodhousen. Now, who's first? I don't know, I've lost my thing.
It's Claire with a mirror. Oh, this is what we didn't have time for this last time. It's a hard sell.
Oh, yes.
As
it were.
Hard sell as opposed to a soft sell, and I'm not talking about the pop group. I'm talking about Wilmot Dixon, the construction company, who have built hotel custody in the form of a new ITV three-parter which goes behind this new custody unit called Birchin Way Custody Facility in Grimsby. Now, what this service is built on brownfield, and it serves a lot of, well, for want of a better word...
Old lags? Young lags?
Well, every kind of detainee you could possibly think of that's been picked up and arrested. But when they go into this new custody suite, there's buzzes for everything. There's buzzes for what time is it? There's buzzes for I'm hungry. There's buzzes for where can I go? Buzzes for when am I getting out? Now, the whole ethos behind the change in moving away from a prison cell, moving away from the very punitive way that we all think that prisons perhaps ought to be run, to teach people a lesson because people are there because they've done ill in the world, they've harmed people, they've harmed themselves, or they've harmed the economy in some ways.
Are they really being called, as it says here, customers?
Yes.
Seriously?
So even the terminology, the word, the emotive language that is being used here would denote something
But
very...
they're not customers, are they? They're detainees.
Well, and yes, this is the thing. But then if we look back to countries in Europe, and Monaco in particular, and you look at their system of punity and prisons, they serve their prisoners five-star meals, Michelin-starred meals, because they think they're from the understanding and the view that if you treat people well, i.e. you don't degrade them, you don't make them feel as bad as they possibly could, even though they have done some heinous crimes in places, you actually still should treat them with respect. And one of these ways of treating with respect is to, you know, to serve them, basically. Serve them well and, you know, let them use the facility. But the ethos and the view of that is in the hope that a lot of people will not reoffend. They've smacked themselves in the foot. They're saying here that even the sergeant, Ian, jokes, what would you rate us on TripAdvisor? I mean, this language isn't very useful, I don't think. Going behind the scenes at the police facility, a three-part ITV documentary follows the staff as they carry out their tough jobs with humour and grit. I mean, it's appalling, absolutely appalling. Sue says if you show empathy and are actually listening to them other than the customers, you settle them down. But then they think, we don't want people to reoffend, and they've already known and identified several people, predominantly women, who have come back reoffending every time.
That's the key question,
Gangster
isn't it?
Granny. They've even nicknamed her. So I don't think the language is being helpful. I'm calling them customers, and I'll tell you something else. I don't think that allowing our prison system to fall into private hands will do anyone or any society any favours, and I think it has to be stopped.
Nobody's arguing that they shouldn't be treated with respect.
No, because everyone's a human being.
All human beings should. And of course there is a notion, which a lot of people would support, that the better you treat somebody, the more likely they are to actually mend their ways. But not... I mean, this is turning the tables upside down.
I mean, what amuses me is that, you know, American prisons are notorious for their severity, but all this stuff about customers... and even respect, Anne, right? I don't respect a prisoner. I may treat them with courtesy, but I don't respect them if they're a definite offender.
You respect them as a human being, yes.
Well, yeah, but, you know, all we hear about is respect, customers, stakeholders. I'm surprised they're not called stakeholders. All of this comes from America, and it's never thought about here, because when Tony Blair read the Harvard Business Review back in the 90s, you know, it was a Pauline conversion, and ever since...
Have a nice day.
Yeah, have a nice day. Well, not just that, but it's all from American management theory, you know, and it's all rubbish. So, you know, it doesn't sound very grim in Grimsby, I must say.
Just a final point, if you do tune in, a 61-year-old gangster granny checks in after stealing a fountain pump from a garden centre. She's a prolific offender, having recently served jail time, but she enjoys her hot cuppa and a chat before heading off to her cell for her beauty sleep.
Well, you see, I can imagine that, actually, too.
OK.
I mean, for many people, that might be absolutely favourable to living in the real outside world.
Yep.
Talking of modern management, you picked up the Daily Star, James. Politicians attempt relatability, whatever that is, but fail miserably, close quotes.
Well, it's a hilarious story from the Star, with which I confess I'm not entirely familiar, but they've got all of these typical, I suppose, jokes like unbelievable, and what it's all about is politicians tucking into hamburgers, butties, Bananas most famously with David Miliband, and they always get it wrong.
And the bacon sandwich with Ed Miliband.
That's right.
So they're trying to come over as man or woman of the people.
You know, but this isn't politics, right? I mean, I don't go to McDonald's. Is that a criminal offence?
Exactly.
You know, I am prepared to talk politics. And so it does reflect how they themselves feel out of touch, and therefore they affect a plebeian, you know, eating habit, and then they come a cropper. And you've got to laugh because they really are out of touch.
And again, American? Is this from the American political handbook? The man of the people?
In America, you'd probably say, no, I eat a £87 steak from Tom Whipple or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
But
uncooked red meat.
That's right. They would show off. Whereas here, we're all concerned to, you know, and the Tories as well, to be plebeian. Nobody buys it. They all look very stupid. I don't know whether the TV, your cameras can pick that up.
If you hold it very still. Yeah, we're reminded there of David Miliband with his banana. That's
Ed Miliband, yes.
Ed Miliband with his sloppy bacon sandwich.
A giant gourd of some sort.
John Gummer, of course, who ate a hamburger when he was trying to prove
and that was before the mad cow
safe.
disease.
Well, it was during. It was during mad cow. He was trying to say British beef is safe. I would even feed it to my daughter there. And it massively backfired on him because it just looked terrible.
Well, he's the man in charge of the Climate Change Commission, let's not forget. You know, dictating that we all buy heat pumps. And that, good luck with that, Lord Deben, as he's known.
Is that what he is now?
Yeah.
OK. The Guardian, Claire. Islanders themselves do not believe the proposal would tackle depopulation. That's 50,000 quid to move to the Scottish Islands.
I'm really surprised this is only a brief footnote, actually, almost as a footnote in The Guardian. The Scottish Government came up with this harebrained scheme to offer £50,000 to people, families, to move to Orkney predominantly. There's 100, almost, 90 inhabited islands where communities face challenges of population and housing pressures. But they've scrapped it. Do you know why they scrapped it? Because they received feedback that it's not going to work. Why didn't they do the feedback before the Blooming Mill launched it? Again, another SNP catastrophe.
Why didn't it work?
Because the islanders have said that it should be scrapped after consultation found that the islanders themselves did not believe the scheme was the right way to tackle depopulation. They're finding that you've got more retirees and second homeowners wanting
rather than young families going and starting off.
Yes, exactly, that have an attainment or have a connection with the island. And one of the Liberal Democrats up there said there'd be better use of the money for infrastructure. Why don't we open up? There's only one airport serving there, and that's Inverness. The Caledonian ferry fiasco that the SNP clearly can't get its head round because it's mucked up. They can't even build bridges. You know, this is again a developed country. We all should be working towards something better than this.
I was in the Orkneys about 8 days ago.
Oh, lovely, Anne.
Fabulous place. But here am I as an older person thinking, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful to live there, to do painting, and, you know, I don't know, it's just the most fabulous place.
But how easy was it to get to?
Well, I was on a cruise ship, so it was very easy.
Well, OK, so
that's called in.
The ferries.
Well, that's one ex. But my niece, actually, my goddaughter, is up there filming the new Saoirse Ronan film at the moment. So they're using a lot of islands for film sets. But it's incredibly difficult to get to.
And the Calmac ferries are all getting very ancient now, aren't they?
Well, they're supposed to have been rebuilt, Mark. They're supposed to have been built by now, but the money's gone.
If you're going to attract younger people who will actually add to the workforce,
the vibrancy of the island,
you've got to make it more accessible.
Yes, and you've got to have the drain.
It's refreshing to hear a critique of the SNP with you, Claire, but I must say that if you look at your report on Felixstowe earlier, you look at the ferries in Scotland, you look at, I hope we'll get time to do at the RMT, there's no doubt that transport is a major area for struggle, for dissent, and it has a very powerful impact on the economy.
Absolutely.
And that's true of Canadian truckers, our own port workers, rail workers, and so on.
We never seem to get to grips with it, do we?
No, well,
I mean, I remember John
Prescott.
Do you remember John Prescott was made Transport Minister or something way back in New Labour days? And he said, I'm going to get to grips with it. We'll move more freight on the rail. We'll take it off the roads, etc., etc. It sounded such a brilliant plan, but it never happened.
And on that point, James, you picked up in The Sun, as we've got another national rail strike today, the strikes may come to a close imminently if Grant Shapps has his way. I suspect that we may see a few more days of industrial action before then.
Well, yes, I think, you know, Shapps is the hapless Shapps, as I like to call him. Here it is in the Sun, page 2. It's the end of the line, Mick. And, you know, since I profess in innovation, I'm always struck by Shapps coming out with these really new ideas, like holding the country to ransom, creating misery, holding us hostage. It's the end of the line. You know, it doesn't really speak a lot for his intellectual powers that he can't muster a proper argument. And I don't believe he can, because their offensive the government is doing is quite brilliant by standing back from it all. I don't know that the RMT is going to be...
Well, in terms of the unions being demonised by the travelling public, or...?
No, but demonised by the government. I think the travelling public is irritated but broadly supportive, actually.
Yes,
There's all the people working from home who are quite supportive as well. I
quite enjoy working from home.
Well, even a 2 or 3 bus journey home from at the office last night, I'm still supporting.
Yes, yes. I think things have changed. You see, this is what the Tories don't understand, that, you know, when you've got large profits being announced by large companies...
As we heard of Felixstowe.
Yeah, and you've got Boris Johnson and all the residue of that. You know, when the Tories come in with this sort of warmed-up 80s Thatcherite rhetoric, it just doesn't play, you know, because people... know that they are not legitimate, that they have made a disaster, that they've been in charge
They've been in charge for 12
years.
years, yes.
So it's different from the 70s.
Well, actually, yeah. And as we were reporting earlier, Labour's lead has gone up to 43% in an overnight poll.
Yep.
43%.
To Conservative,
and they say that Keir
28%.
Starmer is beginning to talk the language of somebody who expects to be in power.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to hear Keir Starmer speak, because so far he's had absolutely nothing to say.
Thank you for joining us for the moment, but we are going to hear a Labour voice right now, because indeed the Labour Party has drawn up plans to help the lowest paid workers, they say, by requesting the Low Pay Commission now to factor in the current cost of the living crisis when it sets the minimum wage.
Yeah, and that proposal follows an earlier announcement from the party to freeze the energy price cap this autumn. And with inflation soaring to a 40-year high of 10.1%, they argue that the government needs to do more to help households.
Well, let's get the views now of the Shadow Minister for Employment Rights and Protections, Justin Madders, joining us. Good morning to you, Mr Madders. Thanks for taking the time to speak to us. On this very issue, The Times has got the latest poll, which may make quite promising reading for you and for your party leader. Labour's lead, as we were saying, 43%. Over Conservatives at 28%. And interestingly, the idea about freezing the cost of energy bills, good idea, 69%, say, the 1,600 or 1,700 British adults who were questioned.
Well, it's very clear from talking to people in my constituency, as most MPs do, is that the cost of living crisis is the #1 issue in the country at the moment, and people are absolutely petrified about what is coming down the track. So I'm not surprised that our announcement this week on how we're going to tackle the energy bills has gone down extremely well. But it's also important to say that one poll, although it's very positive, is just one poll, and you've got to look at the overall trend, because you can get outliers one way and the other. And whilst we're clearly ahead at the moment, and we've been ahead for some time, there's still a long way to go, probably till the next general election. So we have to keep focused on putting policies forward that we think will resonate with the electorate.
Given your shadow portfolio, employment rights and protections, if you were in power right now, it would be your job to try and sort out all of these disputes that are going on at the moment. What would you do?
Well, I'd actually probably be in the room, which is more than Grant Shapps is doing at the moment. And I have to say that if one looked at this from a certain perspective, you could consider that actually what he's trying to do is prolong the dispute by making provocative statements, by tying the negotiators' hands, and now even threatening the rail workers with redundancy, which is the sort of thing that he was criticising P&O for doing just a few months ago. So I think we would take a completely different approach, and I would hope that we were able to reach a sensible compromise.
How much would you be paying the rail workers, or indeed the Felixstowe dock workers that we just spoken, who would want a 12.1% increase, they say, to actually cope with inflation? I mean, that itself is going to stoke up inflation in the coming year, isn't it?
Well, I think we know that the main factor behind inflation at the moment is the increase in energy costs and the world gas prices, along with some factors to do with manufacturing coming out of COVID. But we wouldn't actually be the ones setting the figures. It would be down to the individual bodies who are negotiating directly with the trade unions. What we wouldn't be doing, though, is trying to hamper those negotiations, which is what appears to be happening at the moment.
Where is your leader at the moment? Why isn't he being more outspoken and sending some sort of alternative agenda to what we're hearing from the two Tory leadership hopefuls and also what we're hearing from the unions? I mean, where is he? What's he saying?
Well, you will see he's been very active this week on our energy price cap policies, and obviously I've come on here today to talk about what we'd like to do in relation to the minimum wage to get us to a point where actually people who are in work can make sure that work pays, and actually we get this cycle ended where we've got 5 million people who are in work who are also in poverty. We really want to be putting our country forward in a situation where people who are in work are able to actually meet their bills rather than this cycle of low pay that we've got at the moment. So we are coming forward with policies. We are on the front foot, and I think that is probably why we're getting these positive poll results.
Right, but let's just drill down a little bit when we look at the plans to provide direct payments on means-tested benefits for pensioners, cutting VAT on energy bills, freezing the cost of energy bills, a higher minimum wage and so on. Where's the money going to come from? Because we've got the OBR, Office of Budget Responsibility, saying the 30 billion headroom we thought we had in the economy, that piggy bank, if you like, it's at least got, half of it has gone. We've got 15 billion at best. You're not going to be able to afford all this.
Well, I think one of the important things that we said at the start of the week on our new energy policy announcement was that it was fully costed. It's really important that, unlike the Conservative candidates, we come forward with proposals that are robust and credible. And what we said in terms of the energy charges is that we would backdate the windfall tax, remove the loopholes that are in there. And actually, what that would do was also reduce inflation, which would create some more headroom in the economy. So I'm very clear that our policies at the moment are fully costed, and they are deliverable as well.
OK, well, we'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Thank you. Time now to talk about all of the showbiz and gossip that's in the news at the moment, and there's plenty of it. I tell you what, though, Stephanie Tetchy, with the wonderful... I've only just seen your necklace.
Wow.
That is a stunner. It so is. Yeah, what's incredible...
Does that signify anything in particular?
No, I wish it did. It just signifies I like
showbiz royalty.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Wow.
Showbiz royalty.
Beyonce.
Yeah, Jamie Oliver is sort of promoting a new cookbook at the moment.
Yes.
But the story that's making the headlines is the fact that his wife, Jules, has not been very well at all with COVID and seems to have long COVID.
Long COVID, indeed. He said that since she contracted COVID 2 years ago, she hasn't been the same, and it's been quite a deeply scary process for the family because she hasn't managed to get back to her normal self. Like, she's such a lively, bubbly character, but she's been quite quiet over the past few months, and now Jamie's explained why that. They keep on making constant trips to Harley Street, trying to find a remedy or a solution, and there's nothing they can do because the data's still coming in for long COVID. At the moment in the country, we have 1.8 million people who still have long COVID, and some of these symptoms are brain fog, fatigue, breathlessness, heart palpitations and nervous system issues and nausea. So for a mother of 5 to be going through that must be quite sad for the family.
Yeah, and of course our heart still goes out to Derek Draper, who's Kate Garraway's husband.
It just shows that, you know, all the money in the world isn't helping on this one at the moment.
Yeah.
We just don't know enough about it.
Celebrity or no celebrity, COVID has affected us all over the past 2 years, and it's just sad when you still hear cases like this where people are still suffering.
And we're maybe thinking, oh, you know, COVID's gone and it's not as serious a disease as we thought it was.
People think, oh, you know, have fun in summer, worry about it in winter, but there are some cases where people are dealing with it all the time.
It's the fact that I think he finds it deeply scary. I think just those two simple words, it's absolutely true, isn't it?
It's been 2 years. Yeah. Well, we wish her well.
Definitely so.
a speedy recovery. We've got the wedding that we spoke of that was in Georgia, if I remember.
Yes.
The £8 million estate.
Yes.
Didn't all go quite...
No.
Hang on, this is Bennifer.
Bennifer. So Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez. As with any wedding, there's been a bit of drama before. Yesterday was supposed to be the rehearsal dinner, but actually Ben Affleck's mother was rushed to hospital yesterday because apparently she fell off a dock and she injured her leg. So it sounds much worse than it is, but she was still rushed to A&E and she's had 5 stitches in her leg.
Oh, ouch.
So that was a bit of pre-wedding drama, but hopefully the wedding is still going ahead this weekend. It is taking place in Ben's lovely mansion in Georgia.
Which obviously has a lake or a river in it, which has a dock that she fell off.
Not been checked for safety. But yeah, so the actual ceremony will be going on today, and then tomorrow they'll be having a barbecue. But as I said yesterday, Jennifer is due to wear a dress by Ralph Lauren, so we'll be waiting for pictures on that.
Right, do we know if they've sold it to any other sort of celebrity magazines?
Vogue magazine.
Vogue.
As usual, Vogue, they're like a monster when it comes to weddings because they get all the rights for them these days. Ben doesn't really want to be involved with that kind of promo. He seems like he wants to be...
They don't need it.
No, it's just about J-Lo. All we want to see is how did she get her hair done, what makeup did she wear, and the dress. So Vogue will be all over.
Gonna buy it?
No, I wouldn't buy it. No. I would be interested to see what... I'd be interested to see what the dress is, because she looks fabulous in anything.
She's incredible.
But if Lorraine are making it for her, it will be spectacular.
It will be. It will be. I predict it's going to have lots of diamonds on it and very chic.
Yeah.
What's going on? Yeah, who knows? Right. OK. Why not? Serious stuff. Topic of the cinema, Cineworld, which is the world's second largest chain and has actually expanded massively just before COVID struck. Was that the problem with that? They're looking perhaps now at going into bankruptcy.
No, well, I don't think that was a problem because before COVID, we were all going to the cinemas. You know, going to cinemas was a part of everybody's lives in a week.
Yeah.
You know, people go see 2-3 films. But they've said since COVID, they haven't managed to balance the tip sheet. And right now, they're in £4 billion worth of debt. And they're blaming that for the lack of blockbusters. They were hoping things like Top Gun Maverick, The Batman, Thor, Love and Thunder, they thought these big blockbusters will be able to get audiences back into
I remember the
cinemas.
Bond film was delayed by almost 2 years, wasn't it, before they hit
All
the
these things have affected their cash flow, and now that, you know, there's no restrictions and people can actually go to the cinemas, the numbers haven't managed to pick up. So,
do you know, I haven't gone to the cinema since COVID.
Yeah.
And as a family, we always used to love going.
Yeah, and it's sad because I think, you know, we're not going to actually realise or respect cinemas until they're gone from the high street. But, you know, thanks to Netflix, Amazon, people's watching habits have changed.
Well, we learned, I mean, of course, I think it's beginning to reverse, but Netflix did incredibly well during the pandemic because they got all sorts of new customers, didn't they?
Not quite the case now, I don't
think.
it's
gone, it's reversing a bit.
But is there another dynamic at play, and that is that people are turning their backs on these big multiplexes? They prefer going to slightly smaller, more intimate. I mean, Everyman is a cinema chain.
I love Everyman.
You know, you're getting your drinks served at your seats and the cocktails,
You know, talking about COVID, I think there's still this fear of being in big spaces with a lot of people. And you're right, I think people's habits have changed. They want more smaller, intimate experiences. Like, I like going to those cinemas where you can put the recliner up and you get your glass of wine on the side, and you can't really get that at a multiplex cinema. But still, it's a shame if an institution like this goes down.
Surely it's big enough to hold.
Or is that the problem?
Well, you'd think it would have enough money to just keep things going until the blockbusters and the big audiences come back. Surely
but
they're
it's
big enough
down to the public and us changing our habits again, and if that doesn't happen...
Yeah, £4 billion of debt is an awful lot to sell tickets to try and...
$4 billion is...
Change it round.
Yeah.
You know, go to your local cinema if you can.
Keep the cinemas going. Very important part of our cultural life, indeed.
Are you going to be coming back in
a bit
later on? Are we going to be talking about the other married couple, Brangelina?
We are.
Oh, gosh, yes.
There's an enormous article in today's Daily Mail
talking about coming back for more drama about that marriage. You know, it's been 6 years since
this is obviously
anything.
Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie.
So now there's been all news about a case that's come up, how Angelina wanted it out there about assault that happened on a private jet plane in 2016.
And the FBI have released the file.
They have, but, you know, Brad was he wasn't charged for assault for
No,
it.
he wasn't charged
but
with it.
Angelina wanted him to be charged for assault. So now she wants to investigate and say why it didn't happen. And there's been pictures released of bruises on her elbow and stuff like that. And it's a shame because they're still a family and they still have kids together.
Well, this is the issue. The kids are involved, and one wonders what they're going to make of it all being.
It's a bit spiteful, I think. You know, I think some of these things need to be dealt with behind closed doors.
Some of these celebrities don't seem to understand that it's very unedifying to watch them sort of airing their dirty linen in public.
You know, for us it's entertainment, but for kids, they have to roll with it.
Good point.
Entertainment.
Stephanie, as ever, thank you very much indeed. We'll see you later.
Looking forward to seeing you later, And do stay with us. We've got lots more coming up on all of the usual things, but including we're going to be meeting that young man who has given up a job in the National Health Service to go on to, what's it called? OnlyFans.
OnlyFans. And we're also meeting Karen, but we may wish that we hadn't. We'll be explaining why coming up.
Stay with us.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Clearing skies for many overnight, but there'll be further wind and rain in the northwest by dawn, and there'll be further showers to come in many spots on Saturday. So a much more changeful weekend compared with the heatwave of last weekend. Weather systems are moving in from the Atlantic, and there's one that is expected to turn up during the early hours of Saturday for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Ahead of that, clear spells for many, 1 or 2 showers still affecting western coasts and hills. But really it's around 2 or 3 in the morning that we'll see some heavy rain and strong winds across western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Coastal gales for the Western Isles. Temperatures holding up at 11 to 13 Celsius here, with single figures across parts of northeast Scotland and some sheltered spots of central and eastern England. Some sunshine in the southeast first thing, showers developing elsewhere, and actually the wind and rain towards the northwest sweeps across the rest of Scotland and Northern Ireland, pushing into the afternoon as a narrow but of thunder, heavy rain. To the south, 1 or 2 showers, but sunny spells are also expected. Breezy, so it'll feel quite cool, but still the potential for mid-20s in the southeast. High teens, low 20s elsewhere, and as we go into Saturday night, it looks like the showers will mostly ease, but still a few lingering across parts of Wales, as well as central and northern Scotland. Away from the showers, again, temperatures in some sheltered spots dipping into the single figures. So a fresh start on Sunday, but a bright start for many. Plenty of sunny spells for central and eastern, as well as northern parts of the country. The cloud will build towards the west and southwest, and we'll see some persistent rain pushing into North Wales, the North Midlands, as well as Cornwall later in the day. That rain then spreads across the country on Monday, turning to showers later.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GBNews.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Head-to-head, but not eye-to-eye, the Tory leadership hopefuls laid out what a future Britain looks like in a post-Johnson era.
Very good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock on Saturday, the 20th of August. You're watching Breakfast on GB News with Anne and Mark.
And we're live across the whole of the UK on both your TV and your radio. Wherever you are, you can take us with you. Here's what we have in store for you at just past 9 o'clock. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak tell a packed crowd of Conservative voters in Manchester what vision they've got for Britain after Boris Johnson leaves office. Both candidates were put on the spot by GB News' Alistair Stewart. Liz Truss said she wants the private sector to grow more than the public sector, whilst Rishi Sunak said government is not here to do everything.
And then Michael Gove endorsed Rishi Sunak for the leadership, saying that the Truss campaign had been a holiday from reality and that he did not accept the SW1 consensus that Liz Truss had already won.
NHS workers are deserting the profession, well, one or two maybe, to become adult entertainers.
Hi guys, my name's James Cowie. I quit my job a year and a half ago to become a full-time OnlyFans creator, when before I worked as a healthcare assistant for 6 years.
Well, we'll be speaking to that likeable lad a bit later on in the programme about why he's joined the website where people apparently pay for adult content from other users.
And have you ever heard of the slang term Karen? If you haven't, it's being used by some as a term for an angry, entitled white woman. And now you can be served by such, Karen, by going along to one of her diners in the UK.
Karen, you really do have to do this interview. They're waiting for you.
Right, come on then.
Well, Karen's going to be joining us here on Breakfast this morning, so we're both really looking forward to that.
Yeah, do you think she'll bring us a coffee?
I wouldn't
bet on it, no. Indeed.
No.
But if you're a Karen, don't forget you can join the discussions by emailing us gbviews@gbnews.uk. We still love you if you call Karen.
Well, the former Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove has now thrown his support behind Rishi Sunak in the Conservative leadership contest. And he's accusing Liz Truss of taking what he called a holiday from reality with her tax plans.
Well, that attack in the Times newspaper this morning on the former cabinet colleague comes as the Tory leadership hopefuls set out their visions for the country at the latest round of hustings in Manchester last night, hosted by GB News' Alistair Stewart.
Now, Rishi Sunak backed Mrs Truss's plan to crack down on striking workers and pledged to get inflation under control.
But the Foreign Secretary said there should also be league tables for police forces and suggested that retired medics should be asked to help clear the COVID backlog for the NHS. Let's take a look at some of the other highlights too.
What is the Sunak vision of how Britain should be through Conservative eyes?
Government can't do everything, but more than that, government shouldn't do everything. We are Conservatives. We believe in personal responsibility. We believe in families. We believe in communities. And yes, COVID happened, but that is not the norm. We've got to be willing to actually just make the argument, because the pressure is always there. And as that's what you've seen over the last 2 years, that's not me. I don't wake up every morning and when a problem comes my way think, oh, well, how can the government spend some money to solve this problem? That is wrong. That's not what a Conservative government should do, and that is not what I will do as Prime Minister.
My ambition is for the private sector to grow more than the public sector. And one of the problems I think we've got is there's been an assumption by various members of what I call the economic orthodoxy that Britain is a low-growth country, and therefore everything is static. We have to make sure that we are taxing people to keep up with public spending. That is not my vision. I believe we can get to much higher growth. I want the private sector to be bigger compared to the public sector. And I want a sustainable public sector. You know, we have far too many quangos in this country. We have 500 of them. We need to trim it down to size, and we need to make the government efficient.
I am winning the argument about tackling inflation, being responsible with our borrowing, about actually supporting vulnerable people this autumn and winter, which my plan will do, Liz's plan does not do, about actually reforming our tax system so it delivers growth.
We do need to make sure our police are policing the streets rather than policing Twitter and focusing on the right crimes the public are concerned about. See, what I would do is have league tables that compare police forces and how they are performing so they can really be held to account by the public.
Well, after all the debating, GB News' political correspondent Tom Harwood caught up with Sir Graham Brady, who is, of course, the chairman of the 1922 committee, on how the Tory leadership hopefuls have done so far.
What a couple of hours of debate. Fantastic, incisive questioning, of course, not just from Alistair, but from the wonderful, wonderful audience here in Manchester as well. I'm standing just outside the auditorium here. We're going to be seeing a lot of people filtering out. We're going to be getting a lot of views from the audience, hopefully from some people that asked questions as well as those that didn't. But before we get into the punters in the audience, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by the chairman of the 1922 committee, the returning officer, indeed, Sir Graham Brady. Sir Graham, I know you have to be studiously neutral in this contest, but just from that observer's position, how is this contest going? Is it going in the way you expected it to?
Well, I was just really happy to be there. It was a great evening, really good presentations from both the candidates, some good rigorous questioning. And I could say one of the debates that goes on, people say, is this too long a contest or not? And I confess that if anything, I would have liked a shorter contest. But here we are 4 weeks in, and we've got 1,400 Conservative members here in Manchester coming to hear the two candidates, put them through their paces. I'm starting to think this is actually a very good thing.
A lot of people are saying that it's a bit repetitive, that this process was potentially too truncated in that first week, that we whittled through all the many candidates that the Conservative MPs had the opportunity to see. Potentially some members would have liked to see some more names through to that final ballot. What do you make of those criticisms of your process?
Well, it's not my process. We have a constitution of the party. It gives the 1922 committee a duty, which is to provide two candidates that will go to the party members. So, of course, some people say we'd rather have 3 or 6 or whatever number. That is what we are charged with doing. We did it in a good, rigorous and efficient process. It took 8 days from start to end. And I think pretty much all of my colleagues, as far as I'm aware, all of my colleagues in Parliament, think we did a good job. We ran a good, free and fair process. And today's evidence, we got 2 very good candidates out for the party and the country to choose between.
Well, there you are. It's all happening still and goes on for another, 6th of September, they reckon, isn't it, that we're going to get a Prime Minister?
Yeah, we might get the Prime Minister at the desk with a new government, perhaps. Let's bring you up to date with the other headlines. Meantime, with more travel disruption, I'm afraid, expected today. Union members now from 18 train companies walking out. Just 20% of our rail network said to be up and running today. Some parts of the country, indeed, having no trains at all. Train services too tomorrow, Sunday, affected by the aftermath of the strike action, with trains being left in the wrong places. Yesterday saw little to no service on the London Tube network as well, whilst most buses across the west and southwest of the capital also cancelled. Travel misery.
The former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, says he would ban new smart motorways and what he calls a war on motorists. He described them as unsafe and plans to stop them being made whilst also improving then existing roads. His pledge is to prevent rogue parking fines and review low-traffic neighbourhoods over concerns that they have led to difficulties for emergency vehicles. They're just some of the pledges he hopes can help him win that Tory leadership.
Nurses are to wear these new smart glasses to maximise time with patients on home visits. The virtual reality-style goggles, part of a new NHS trial. They'll transcribe appointments directly to electronic records, all to reduce time spent on admin. The smart glasses being trialled at the Northern Lincolnshire and Goole NHS Foundation Trust from next week.
We will have to find out more about those smart glasses, because I can't understand how putting on a pair, no matter how clever they are, how is that going to cut down on admin?
I think, does it actually send the details from the glasses to a computer? But one wonders how much quicker is that than writing actually on a piece of... Anyway, so... But good luck to them.
Well, yes.
Probably lose them or sit on them.
Weird, isn't it? Now, amidst the rising cost of living and the looming threat of recession, the UK is also grappling with ongoing industrial action led by Network Rail. Today, only 20% of train services will run as 45,000 workers take to the picket line, leaving many travellers stranded on one of the busiest summer weekends.
Well, our Scotland reporter David Donaldson has been throughout the morning in Edinburgh and has the latest for us from Waverley.
Yeah, I'm outside Waverley Station on the picket line where all workers are understandably not happy with their pay and conditions. And it's not just that, it's about the safety they feel in the network as well. Delighted to say I'm joined by Mick Hogg, the RMT man in Scotland. Mick, what's it all about?
What the strike's all about is about fairness and equality, and what RMT are actually seeking is a fair pay increase and stability, job security for rail workers. Rail workers have actually been denied a pay increase for the last 3 years. So what we're actually seeking, what we're actually demanding is a pay increase for workers who have actually went above and beyond the call of duty during the height of the pandemic.
It's not just Network Rail we're talking about. Obviously, there's a massive strike, 45,000 workers across the UK. We're talking about here in Scotland, ScotRail, not a great situation there either.
Yes, the situation within the ScotRail is that we've actually, RMT's recently rejected the pay proposal that's on the table. So what we're now doing is we're going to ballot for strike action and action short. And what we're actually seeking is a fair pay increase, because the 5% that's on the table falls well short of where we actually need to be in terms of a pay increase that actually reflects the cost of living crisis.
It's going to be a long haul, isn't it, for commuters over the, we've seen trains 5:30, 6:30 the last train, and some trains obviously further north in Scotland not going at all.
Absolutely. We remain available for meaningful talks with Network Rail, the train operating companies, ScotRail, morning, noon and night. We don't want to actually go on a strike, but our hands been forced. We've been forced to go on a strike, and we're going to remain on the strike until such time we actually get a fair crack off the whip, a fair pay increase for workers who have actually went above and beyond the call of duty during the height of the pandemic.
Thanks very much, Mick. There we go. Mick Hogg, RMT man here in Scotland, asking for a fair deal for workers. Let's see if that's going to happen, or do commuters face even more traffic chaos?
Yes, say that with a smile on your face. Yeah. Rod says, hi, like many people, I'm sure they feel the same as me. The cost of living is causing all of these strikes. But what about us pensioners who can't strike and have to face all these price rises? Just be grateful you have a job, and that most are pretty well paid.
Interesting one from John in West Yorkshire, after we've just been hearing there from the RMT. On the rail disputes, whatever happened to the arbitration service, ACAS? Couldn't they help in this situation?
Shouldn't they be there already? They still exist, ACAS, don't they?
This is I don't know if they do, but clearly, I mean, that's the issue, where Grant Shapps is saying it's up to the train companies to actually negotiate directly with the unions, and the unions saying, no, the government is actually putting blocks in the way between those talks going on. So it seems to be the blame game going round and round.
That's something else for us to find more about. What happened to ACAS? Jason says, hi, Anne. Whilst I'm certainly no fan of Starmer, his absence recently was explained. He said, I am also a father, an important thing, and I'm going to take my children on holiday, or words to that effect. True. Right. I just think, you can't help wondering at the moment, since it does seem to be such an ongoing crisis, whether certain politicians shouldn't go on holiday. Not now. Yeah, well, Labour was trying to get Parliament recalled on Monday to get a lot of these issues addressed, and MPs saying, well, they still do work during recess, but an awful lot of them, including our current Prime Minister, seem to be sunning themselves on foreign shores. Where's Boris at the moment? Greece. Oh, is he? Yeah, I don't know if he's still out there, but he was pictured on the... Well, I know a lot of people watching right now will say, well, they have to go on holiday. They're human beings. Why not? I don't know. The country's in crisis. If you were leading it, would you go on holiday at the moment? Jean says, good morning. Sadly, the railways do need bringing into the 21st century, and this also will mean job losses. Then and only then will they get the money they want.
Yeah, well, that's, I think, part of
We
the
were
issue for
talking
the
about the
unions.
state of the railway.
They actually want to make sure their conditions are safeguarded as well as the pay deal. So we shall keep you updated on what's happening on the strikes today, and also more to come, including this.
Karen, Anne Diamond and Mark Longhurst are coming in 5 minutes to do you an interview. Are you not ready?
Anne Diamond and Mark Longhurst?
Yes.
Oh my God, they were here just last week. They're so fussy, they won't leave me alone. Do they actually want this interview?
Yeah.
Do I have to actually speak to them?
Go and speak to them.
See what we have to cope with.
I don't know about you, but I'm beginning to find her a little bit irritating. Don't you?
Don't say that.
No, apparently you can't. Not to her. She talks it to you. Very rude. We'll get served by Karen next, so do stay tuned to find out what happens.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Clearing skies for many overnight, but there'll be further wind and rain in the northwest by dawn, and there'll be further showers to come in many spots on Saturday. So a much more changeful weekend compared with the heatwave of last weekend. Weather systems are moving in from the Atlantic, and there's one that is expected to turn up during the early hours of Saturday for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Ahead of that, clear spells for many, 1 or 2 showers still affecting western coasts and hills. But really it's around 2 or 3 in the morning that we'll see some heavy rain and strong winds across western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Coastal gales for the Western Isles. The temperatures holding up at 11 to 13 Celsius here, with single figures across parts of northeast Scotland and some sheltered spots of central and eastern England. Some sunshine in the southeast first thing, showers developing elsewhere, and actually the wind and rain towards the northwest sweeps across the rest of Scotland and Northern Ireland, pushing into northern England by the end of the afternoon as a narrow but quite lively feature. Strong winds, odd rumble of thunder, heavy rain. To the south, 1 or 2 showers, but sunny spells are also expected. Breezy, so it'll feel quite cool, but still the potential for mid-20s in the southeast. High teens, low 20s elsewhere, and as we go into Saturday night, it looks like the showers will mostly ease, but still a few lingering across parts of Wales, as well as central and northern Scotland. Away from the showers, again, temperatures in some sheltered spots dipping into the single figures. So a fresh start on Sunday, but a bright start for many. Plenty of sunny spells for central and eastern, as well as northern parts of the country. The cloud will build towards the west and southwest, and we'll see some persistent rain pushing into North Wales, the North Midlands, as well as Cornwall later in the day. That rain then spreads across the country on Monday, turning to showers later.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And it's 20 minutes past 9. Welcome back. You're watching Breakfast here on GB News with me, Anne and Mark.
Yes, good morning to you. Have you ever heard of Karen? Well, if you haven't heard of the slang term Karen, it's used by some as a term for a rather angry, entitled white woman.
So you say, if somebody's a bit obnoxious, you say she's a right Karen.
An idea apparently originating in Australia, now finding popularity, we believe, here in the UK, because Karen's Diner now in a number of cities across the UK, with a new diner also opening up in Birmingham.
Yeah, one of our viewers has already got in touch, said, oh, we've got a Karen's Diner in Manchester. So shall we dare to speak to Karen, who's in that Manchester branch at the moment? Oh, well, it looks as though... sorry to wake you up, Karen. Lovely to talk to you. I think it's going to be lovely to talk to you. How are you? Are you with us? Are you awake?
Does it look like I'm awake?
Well, not really.
No.
Yeah. No.
And anyway, thank you very much for joining us. I'm afraid I'm out of cappuccino at the moment. I was just wondering what sort of drinks you might recommend for us there this morning.
Cocktails? Shots?
It's a bit early on a Saturday morning for cocktails and shots, isn't it?
No. I need to reach my target, so get some drinks in.
Right, OK. Anything in particular that you could offer us?
Do you want a dark and stormy, Mark? Want a beer?
Well, maybe not at 9:20, but maybe that's what they do in Australia.
So maybe next time you can read the menu and then let me know what you want. I'm not here to serve you like that.
Right.
Well, okay. I'm told that if I ask for a menu in your restaurant, in your diner, you just sort of drop it on the floor in front of people.
You're right.
Well,
you're going to cry about it?
That's no way to serve people, though, is it?
OK, write a review about it.
I was just wondering whether we ought to book with you tonight. I was just wondering what's on offer tonight if we do come along to the restaurant.
Well, we will serve you a side of humiliation with a little bit of emasculation and just make you look like a fool in front of the whole restaurant. How does that sound, Mark?
So the usual, then, in other words?
Absolutely. Just another day in the office.
How would you describe the service that you offer to people who come along to the diner?
Terrible.
And are you proud of that?
Absolutely.
Right. Monosyllabic as well.
Yeah. I'm just wondering how you feel about service charge, because clearly there's a bit of an argument going on as to whether people should pay tips or not, or whether it should just be put on the bill automatically. Any thoughts on that, dare we ask?
Well, that's not a problem for us, Mark, because if someone doesn't leave us a tip, we just roast them in front of everyone. So if you don't leave a tip, you're more likely going to get more abuse from us.
Right. And when do you start? Are you working now, or do you start work a bit later on today?
No, Anne, I've had to come in early for you. Usually I start at 12. You know what time I've had to wake up this morning? 8 a.m. It's a joke.
Yeah, well, I sometimes think it is too. OK, I think we've got the flavour of your service and style. Let's just go away now and speak to Paul Levin, who's the creative producer of Karen's Diner. And he's joining us, I think, now from Nottingham. A very good morning to you. Thank you for getting up early.
Yep. Well, you've got me out of character. I'm the only nice one in Karen's. It's your morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Can you explain to us what this Karen thing is all about? And where did Karen's Diner start, and where does it come from?
Well, it all started last year in Sydney, and they started with just one restaurant, but now we've got restaurants all over Australia being rude to the Australians. And so we thought, well, if we're going to be rude to Australians, let's see whether we can be rude to the UK. So we're open in Sheffield. We've got a great unit in Sheffield. We're being rude to people in Manchester. And guess what? You've already said we're opening in Birmingham in a few weeks' time, in Grand Central. We're going to be rude to Birmingham. So,
OK, well, I hope Karen's not listening to us right at the moment. She might nod off, I don't know. But does that mean you have to be rather ruder to us than you have to be to Australians?
No, it seems to cross the water quite smoothly, to be perfectly honest. No, the standard of rudeness is really global. So don't worry about that. You won't be disappointed. We'll be rude enough to you at all times whilst you're in the restaurant. But remember, it is an experience. It's a dining experience.
Yes.
And a real form of real escapism. You can get away from it all when you come into a Karen's, that I assure you.
Yeah, so let's just iron out the whole concept of the business plan, as it were. You're basically a restaurant. You can tell us in a moment what sort of food you do serve, because Karen wasn't terribly helpful there. And you expect people to come in and pay to be in your restaurant eating your food, but the waitresses or waiters or anyone who's involved from the restaurant itself is just darn plain rude to you, and people come for that experience.
Thousands of them each week, thank goodness. And let me start off by answering the first question. We're an American-styled New York diner, so the food is theatrically good and lots of it. And you're quite right, we're a restaurant, first of all, and then we have this dining experience that's placed on the top.
And do people come back?
Yeah, we get a very high percentage.
Unfortunately.
Thank you.
And clearly, Paul, Karen is the result of what must be a very intensive staff training programme.
Yeah, it's not easy training people to be as rude as we are.
No. How do you recruit your waiting staff?
Well, there's no shortage of applicants. The thought of being rude to customers and being well paid for it's quite appealing. We do get an element of theatre people who have worked in restaurants, and they get the experience of having live work, live training in the theatre world and working in a restaurant and having damn good fun, because it's great fun working for us.
Right.
Yeah, Karen, do you enjoy your job?
No.
Right.
OK.
But do you enjoy being rude to people?
Yeah.
Is it a laugh?
No. This is just me.
OK.
OK. How long have you been doing it?
All my life. I'm just finally getting paid for it.
It clearly comes naturally.
Paul, dare I ask what happens if someone realises, or doesn't realise rather, that it's all an act and a bit of a joke? Things could get a bit sort of uncomfortable, couldn't they?
No, the minute anybody walks in, the first thing that the greeter will do is explain that the language is a little sort of fierce in the restaurant, and do they know the sort of restaurant they're walking into? And that goes with families as well, because we get families, very high percentage actually of families. So we immediately tell the parents, look, you know what you're going to be in for. We look at the kids, and the kids are delighted at the thought that we're going to be rude to the parents. And usually it's the kids that have got all the excitement, and the parents are more nervous than the staff.
Yeah, Karen, are people ever rude back to you? And if so, what do they say?
Well, they try to be. You know, when we ask them for a tip, they'll be like, ha, don't eat yellow snow. But we hear it all the time. So no one's original. No one's ruder than us. They try, but they always fail.
And have we got to tip you for this morning's performance?
Yes.
OK. Well,
don't hold your breath.
Have you got any coins?
You need me to send you my account number and sort code? And I'll send you my account number and sort code now. I want it within 5 minutes.
I bet you will.
All right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't do it on your iPhone. You might get hacked.
Yeah. Look, it's great to talk to you both. Thank you very much indeed. You're clearly doing well. If the next one opening up, as you say, is in Birmingham, it's certainly going down well in Australia. Why not here too? Thank you very much, Karen, for joining us. Yeah, thank you.
OK. And Paul, thank you very much too. And we'll catch up with you again, maybe. We'll see what
Can I go now?
See what the restaurant guide makes of it. Yeah, thanks very much indeed.
You can go back to bed now,
Yeah.
Karen. Thank you. Yeah. Do stay with us. We've got plenty more to come, including just how much do you know about this adult content website called OnlyFans? We'll tell all after a break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farrow.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Did we get our coffee then with her? No.
I wouldn't trust a coffee from her, would you?
Anyway, I'm not leaving a tip, are you? No. I never do. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with me, Mark and Anne this Saturday morning.
Now, have you heard of OnlyFans? I never had until yesterday. Maybe you've even got one or know someone who does, because OnlyFans is a social media platform which they say is revolutionising the relationship between content creators and fans.
Right. Well, primarily perhaps known for its adult content. OnlyFans coming into the mainstream consciousness, whatever that is, during the pandemic when countless people turned to the site, yes, to make ends meet.
Yeah, because you can actually earn money through it.
Yeah.
And that's the point.
These days, it's a bit more than ends meet, perhaps. Some creators are raking in with celebrities such as Kerry Katona, former Hollyoaks actress Sarah Jane Dunn, and Kate Moss's baby sister Lottie Moss. They're actually pulling in the cash, it seems.
Well, we're joined now by James Cowie, who's a former healthcare assistant for dementia patients, and apparently left his job, well, he'll tell us now, left his job to pursue fame on OnlyFans, earning up to £3,000 in his first week on the platform. Like James, apparently they say rising numbers of workers, social care staff, even some people who work for the NHS are turning to this in a cost of living crisis to try and make some money. So let's talk to James now. A very good morning to you. Glad you've got your clothes on.
Hello, good morning.
James,
nice to be with you.
Can you explain in your own words then exactly what OnlyFans is? Because I can't quite get my head around it. How does it work and how does it make money for you?
So the biggest part of the job for me is building an online presence. That's through Instagram, TikTok, across all the social platforms where I'm wearing clothes most of the time, which probably sounds hilarious. But and then on OnlyFans, I share more X-rated content where people can fall over from my Instagram over to OnlyFans, where they pay me a subscription fee, and it sort of works like that. It's just a monthly fee that people pay me, and I got really lucky when I left my job in healthcare to move forward, and it's just been the craziest journey I think I've ever done, and it probably will be for the rest of my life.
I understand that you left the NHS because you felt demoralised, and clearly, you know, pay is an issue. But isn't it actually demoralising to have to make money this way by, well, is it pimping yourself, dare I ask?
I mean, I'm not sleeping with anyone on camera. It is content creation. It is solo content. It is also probably just as hard work as what I was doing in healthcare, just a different style of work. I was always fascinated by social media, and I studied it at college, so it was something I did eventually want to go into. But to be honest with you, towards the end of my healthcare journey, I worked in healthcare for 6 years. Towards the end of those 6 years, it was completely exhausting. I was completely burnt out. I was earning £1,100 a month after tax, and I was struggling to sort of see a future. My family are nurses, and I was considering becoming a nurse. But this was just a far better option for me.
Are you, in effect, what people would nowadays call a sex worker?
I wouldn't say I'm a sex worker. I would say I create sexualized content, but I'm also an influencer, and I'm creating a lot of content across platforms that aren't necessarily sexual all the time. So it is a real mixture, but I do create sexual content, but I don't sleep with people, and create that type of content and share that. So,
but basically, people contact you through the website and then ask you to do certain things for them on camera, as it were, and they pay you to do that. Am I right? Am I getting that interaction right? Don't you feel endangered? I mean, isn't that quite a dangerous thing to be involved in?
100%, yeah. And, this is why you have to have boundaries with what you're doing. You have to be really careful about, actually, these are real people. You do have a responsibility of yourself and other people as well. You have to make sure that their mental health is okay, and all of that kind of stuff. I'm really careful with who I do requests with and the type of requests they're asking for. I have had some really strange requests in the past where I actually just give out refunds because I'm just like, this is just doesn't feel right. So it is interesting kind of way of working, and it does become part of your lifestyle for sure.
Let's dial back and talk about the NHS, because clearly that is an issue. That so many people are leaving the health service and they're having problems recruiting. I think you're pointing to the fact that your pay offer was only 1% and you literally couldn't cope with that sort of financial situation anymore. I mean, how many other people are in that situation with you?
I would say when I left with the 1% pay rise, it was like that final thing for me. I was planning on leaving anyway, but that really was just a kick in the teeth. And I thought I really need to do something about this now. And, in life, we have a choice what we do with our work. So I decided to make this jump, and it worked out for me. I think other healthcare workers, they are definitely leaving, not necessarily to go into OnlyFans, but all types of industries. I think they're leaving to go, in any other type of work, even hospitality, where they might feel more appreciated. They're getting paid, even similar money, just with less stress. It really, really was, quite a lot in the end. I think because of the lack of staff, the underfunding, feeling underappreciated, really took its toll.
I think a lot of people would have sympathy with what you've just said there about a job in which you feel undervalued. But effectively, haven't you just gone into what is basically the thin end of the online porn wedge? I mean, that's what you're doing effectively, isn't it?
Yes, a type of. And, it's something I frowned upon before I looked at going into. It's something I never would have considered myself. But I really was that desperate to leave. And with my qualifications, I only had social media at college. There wasn't many other viable options for me where I could earn more money sort of quickly to get out of that sector. So that's why I made the jump to this. Luckily for me, I've got an amazing family that support me and, have encouraged me through. And I'm doing it in a way that I feel that is morally okay, and I'm okay with that.
What would actually persuade you to go back and take up the caring role that you had for dementia patients, let's not forget?
I'll be completely honest with you. I think after 6 years, and of how I felt in the end, I don't think it would be possible. Now, after this, imagine going back now. Yeah, I think they deserve more pay. I think they deserve not just more pay, but to have more staff. Is just so huge. You know, when you're working understaffed, you're literally in tears by the end of your shift. These people, these clients, they really rely on you. They deserve the care that they need. And if they're not getting it, then we're living in a really strange world.
Finally, aren't you just dressing up your decision to go into a pretty tacky industry by knocking the last one you were working with, by knocking the NHS?
I don't think so, no.
OK, you answered the question. Thank you. Thanks very much indeed. We'll leave it there. Thank you.
James Galley there with a change of career. Thank you very much indeed. Let's perhaps ask you what your view might be on that. You've been getting in touch with us all through the morning with your views, and gbviews@gbnews.uk is...
Yeah, last night, a very big night for GB News because we hosted the Manchester Hustings with our very own Alistair Stewart.
Well, both Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak setting out their vision for a post-Johnson Conservative Party. If you happen to miss it, let's recap on what happened.
What is the Sunak vision of how Britain should be through Conservative eyes?
Government can't do everything, but more than that, government shouldn't do everything. We are Conservatives. We believe in personal responsibility. We believe in families. We believe in communities. And yes, COVID happened, but that is not the norm. We've got to be willing to actually just make the argument, because all the pressure is always there. And as that's what you've seen over the last 2 years, that's not me. I don't wake up every morning and when a problem comes my way, think, oh, well, how can the government spend some money to solve this problem? That is wrong. That's not what a Conservative government should do, and that is not what I will do as Prime Minister.
My ambition is for the private sector to grow more than the public sector. And one of the problems I think we've got is there's been an assumption by various members of what I call the economic orthodoxy that Britain is a low-growth country, and therefore everything is static. We have to make sure that we are taxing people to keep up with public spending. That is not my vision. I believe we can get to much higher growth. I want the private sector to be bigger compared to the public sector, and I want a sustainable public sector. You know, we have far too many quangos in this country. We have 500 of them. We need to trim it down to size, and we need to make the government efficient.
I am winning the argument about tackling inflation, being responsible with our borrowing, about actually supporting vulnerable people this autumn and winter, which my plan will do, Liz's plan does not do, about actually reforming our tax system so it delivers growth.
We do need to make sure our police are policing the streets rather than policing Twitter and focusing on the right crimes the public are concerned about. See, what I would do is have league tables that compare police forces and how they are performing so they can really be held to account by the public.
That's what happened on stage. What about afterwards? Well, our GB News political correspondent Tom Harwood then caught up with Sir Graham Brady, yes, the chairman of the 1922 committee, who was at the event last night too.
What a couple of hours of debate, fantastic, incisive questioning, of course, not just from Alistair, but from the wonderful, wonderful audience here in Manchester as well. I'm standing just outside the auditorium here. We're going to be seeing a lot of people filtering out. We're going to be getting a lot of views from the audience, hopefully from some people that asked questions as well as those that didn't. But before we get into the punters in the audience, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by the chairman of the 1922 committee, the returning officer, indeed, Sir Graham Brady. Sir Graham, I know you have to be studiously neutral in this contest, but just from that observer's position, how is this contest going? Is it going in the way you expected it to?
Well, I was just really happy to be there. It was a great evening, really good presentations from both the candidates, some good rigorous questioning. And I could say one of the debates that goes on, people say, is this too long a contest or not? And I confess that if anything, I would have liked a shorter contest. But here we are 4 weeks in, and we've got 1,400 Conservative members here in Manchester coming to hear the two candidates, put them through their paces. I'm starting to think this is actually a very good thing.
A lot of people are saying that it's a bit repetitive, that this process was potentially too truncated in that first week, that we whittled through all the many candidates that the Conservative MPs had the opportunity to see. Potentially some members would have liked to see some more names through to that final ballot. What do you make of those criticisms of your process?
Well, it's not my process. We have a constitution of the party. It gives the 1922 committee a duty, which is to provide 2 candidates that will go to the party members. So, of course, some people say we'd rather have 3 or 6 or whatever number. That is what we're charged with doing. We did it in a good, rigorous and efficient process. It took it 8 days from start to end. And I think pretty much all of my colleagues, as far as I'm aware, all of my colleagues in Parliament, think we did a good job. We ran a good, free and fair process. And today's evidence, we got 2 very good candidates out for the party and the country to choose between.
There we go. It was a very big night politically, but time now to talk other things, I think. Maybe something that might put a smile on our face. Aidan and Stephanie join us, because there's a lot of showbiz and a lot of sport, as you'd expect. We were just talking there, I was making a note of something, and my handwriting is appalling, and it used to be good. I used to have good handwriting, but then when I went to journalism college and learned shorthand, my handwriting went really
Did you do
appalling.
Pitman's?
No, T-line.
Oh, you did T-line.
Yeah.
Ah, that's why.
Yeah. And that wrecks your handwriting for a start. And then, of course, now, years and years of typing rather than ever writing.
I get pain in my hand if I
Yeah.
write it too long. I just couldn't believe I used to write reams and reams of stuff about.
But I remember when I was at school as well, our teacher said, "Don't use a ballpoint. Don't, and you know,
That's right.
you've got gel pen.
Yeah.
Use a fountain pen," as they used to call it in those days.
I used to love those.
Proper nib.
I used to get one for Christmas.
Yeah.
I think it was just seen as lazy.
Conway Stewart.
Yeah. Oh, no, I was a Parker or
right.
Schaefer. Yeah.
Anyway, happy days.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just one of those interesting things. I wonder how many people ever handwrite anymore. Jeffrey Archer, the novelist, handwrites all his novels.
Still.
Yeah, he handwrites them all.
Wow.
And I think quite a
that
few
could
authors
explain
do.
a lot.
Yeah. It gives you time to think as you're writing, I guess. But tedious if you're having to go back and do it all again. And
Well, I think that the game changer was when electronic typewriters came in, because you could write and then they'd have a correctional tape where you could just go back and
it was like a Tipex.
Yeah, it was like I used to think it sucked the ink out of the paper, but it wasn't as sophisticated as that.
And who invented Tipex?
It was Mike Nesmith's mum.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mike
Nesmith of the Monkees.
Yeah.
His mum invented Tipex.
Wasn't she a secretary, or she had a secretarial college or something like
That's
that?
right.
And she invented correcting fluids.
Yeah.
Wow.
There you go.
Well, I had an Olivetti.
No, I'm a believer.
There you go.
Anyway, are we going to talk sport first or showbiz? Who's going to go for it?
Yeah, why not?
Boxing, because it's a big night.
Huge night this evening. I mean, it's do or die, really, for Anthony Joshua. We don't like talking in those terms, but he said he's going to be killed or be killed because his career is... as a top-level boxer, it's probably over tonight. I still think the Fury fight will happen for commercial reasons sometime in future, but it won't be the boxing event or in terms of the actual boxing itself, it won't be quite as good if he doesn't win tonight. If he wins tonight, all is forgiven, but he was schooled last time, Mark. He was absolutely dominated, Anne.
Yeah, he's a Ukrainian who's much smaller than him.
But he's highly
together,
skilled.
and you think, gosh, Joshua's going to flatten him. But he was, as you say, he was given a boxing lesson. Wasn't
he was dominated, and that was in London. And afterwards, it was chilling when Usyk looked into the camera and said, "I wasn't even fighting at full tilt." And so I don't fear for Joshua. I don't think he's going to get hurt. But you're going to ask me for a prediction because of all this Mystic McGee madness that's been going on for weeks. I'm going Usyk to stop Joshua in the 8th round.
How long did it get to the last time?
It went the distance, but it was a comfortable win for Usyk, overall. But I mean, as I say,
and where is it, and when is it going to be seen?
Well, the coverage gets underway from 6 o'clock. It's £27 to a British viewer on DAZN. But Usyk has made it free to all Ukrainians. He tried to buy the rights from the Saudis this week. Saudis actually gave it to him. And said, look, you can show it to your own people for nothing.
That's cool.
And so that is cool, yeah, exactly. And then, but tonight, Joshua, there is an undercard, quite a decent undercard, but Joshua won't take to the ring until around about 10:30.
And if he does lose tonight, I mean, is that it? He'll have to acknowledge he's not really the top world class that everyone.
I don't think he'll see it that way. No, he won't, because he's still young enough to fight back. We are in the era now where heavyweights go on to the late 30s.
Yes.
So I think time isn't the issue. Right. It's whether I think that Andy Ruiz fight in 2019 really did for him. Although he went back and beat Ruiz, he didn't do it convincingly. Ruiz was hopelessly out of shape. But I think that the beating he took that night and being floored 4 times, I think that left us an indelible psychological mark.
Does have an effect on you?
Yeah, it does. But again, Ruiz came in like giving away so much in height and weight. I mean, well, not weight, but he was totally out of shape. He was a stand-in, and he wiped the floor with him. And that made people think that actually, who's Anthony Joshua actually fought? Going back through the years, one by one. Klitschko was past his best. He fought people like Dominic Brazil and out-of-shape Dillian White as well. And you think, who's he actually beaten? Because when that loss happens, you start questioning that. You can't go back. Is it all hype? Is it another British contender we've been told is great, but when it gets into the ring...
Bruno again.
Well, but to be fair to Bruno, he was tough, he was durable, he fought everyone in front of him, he beat some, he lost some.
Mike Tyson.
He fought him twice and he put up a reasonable fight against him, but I mean, he went up against most of the contenders around his time. He's in a really good era. I'm not sure the current era. It's decent, it's better than it's been for a while, but it's not as good as as Witherspoon, as Tyson, Amanda Holyfield, Riddick Bowe, these guys. Sorry, I'm taking up too much time.
No. I did want to ask, it's a bit controversial, but do you think Anthony Joshua is one of the greatest boxers we have in the UK at the moment?
Yeah, he is, but he could... If he wins tonight, as I say, all is forgiven, and suddenly we're starting to talk about him in the same breath as the likes of Lennox Lewis. I mean, I still don't think he's quite that calibre. Those two don't get on. But, some of the ones...
Was he given the wrong fight tactics last time to go out and box? Because...
Yes, I think he was. So if he's going to win tonight, most of the experts are saying he's got to go in early.
Just wallop him.
He's 22 pounds heavier. So there's a power advantage, there's a height advantage as well, significant height advantage. Usyk, you could argue, is not really... wouldn't be his natural weight. He's stepping up slightly to get into that heavyweight category. So, look, he's got a chance. People are not writing off Joshua completely. It'd be great if he could do it. But then... And also, there's the effects of... Since all that happened, Ukraine's been invaded. You know, Usyk has been... His training's been disrupted by the war. So is that playing into it as well? We don't know. I mean, he didn't seem as confident. He was asked about the fight last night, Usyk, and he said at the weigh-in, and he said, they said, are you going to be walking out with the belts again? And he said, we'll see. Normally you say,
it's not fighting
definitely,
talk.
not really.
Is it? No. Stephanie, tell us why Rick Astley is making headlines.
You know, this year has been the year of the 80s comeback. Yeah. So, as we saw in Stranger Things, we know with Kate Bush running up the hill, scored #1. And now Rick Astley has re-recorded the video for Never Gonna Give You Up.
Wow.
But he's done it because he's done it as a part of an advert for the Californian State Automobile Association. So we might have some clips of seeing him back in action.
Oh.
But he's basically done the same video again, but 35 years later. And currently on YouTube, this video, not this video, the original one, has 1 billion views.
He was a T-boy at Stock Aitken and Waterman, do you know that?
Was he?
I didn't know that.
He was, and he came out of Warrington. I saw him in concert about 10 years ago.
You've also revealed to us that you sang this song, Never Gonna Give You Up, at karaoke.
Yeah, I was with an ex-girlfriend in Barbados, and we were doing karaoke, and I had no plans to step up. It was a January time, it was, about, 2003. And out of nowhere, I just got out of my seat and went up and did it. Never gonna give you up.
Oh, yeah.
You down.
It was a huge song.
It was.
Such a catchy song.
It was brilliant.
I'm loving it. I'm loving how this new generation of music fans are learning about all these classic hits from the 80s. And you know what? He hasn't aged that much.
No, I was going to say, he looks remarkably good. Because he's, 56 now?
Yeah.
I think he looks very good.
I was just wondering if he could fit into the same clothes, but they're saying gave a nod to the outfits from the original video and donned similar ensemble. So obviously he's not kept the original gear.
He's quite a talented guy, actually. He's quite a talented guy. He wrote his own stuff.
Yeah.
About 91, he started writing his own...
Did he write that one?
He didn't write that one, no. That was a Stock Aitken and Waterman from the Hits Factory.
It had that sort of imprint of the
Well, it did. It was the same
factory,
beat. It was the same beat, yeah. It was kind of Bananarama, that kind of stuff, and Brother Beyond and things like that. But then...
That's the only song I know from Rick Astley. I don't know any other hits.
No, but never mind Rick Astley. What about this Boris Johnson drama? Because that's what I love, a nice bit of political drama. If indeed
This
it is going to be.
This England.
Yeah.
So we know the light's been dimmed on Boris's political career, but not on TV, because next month on Sky Atlantic and on Now, they're bringing a series called This England. It's going to be... Boris is going to be played by Kenneth Branagh, and I'm sorry... I know Kenneth's a really good actor, but him with the prosthetics of Boris looks quite scary. But basically, he is going to be the drama is going to be about how Boris handled the first wave of the COVID drama, and that is Kenneth Branagh as Boris Johnson there.
Wow.
The hair looks even worse than the real thing,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Oh, I don't know. I think that looks quite
Really
convincing. But so is it a drama, documentary type drama, or is it?
Yeah, it's a 10-part drama, but also it's based on, obviously, the real-life experience of the first wave of COVID and how Boris handled it. And then also you've got experts who've also lent their opinion to the drama. So it's very much real life, and it's going to be a 10-part series.
10 parts?
Wow.
Yeah. And then
Longer than the real thing.
Yes.
And then we're going to have not Kerry Johnson on there, but she's going to be played by Olivia Lovibond. And this is going to be coming on the 20th.
Sorry, who?
Olivia Lovibond.
That's quite a name.
She looks like a Bond girl.
She's been on BBC sitcom W1A and Guardians of the Galaxy. And so
W1A, I remember that.
Yeah, so she's
But this isn't a comedy. I'm trying to get my head around it.
No, it's not a comedy.
It's not a comedy.
Annie, it's
well, it
real
might
life.
be.
Yeah. If it's based on real life events, it might be.
It's not a comedy. It's going to be a real life based on what happened with Boris and how he handled COVID. And also we'll see how he handled his COVID battle.
That's right.
As well.
Yeah,
There's plenty of drama there, isn't there?
Yeah, it's going to come out on 21st of September, folks.
Well, look, we are running out of time, I think. I think we've only got about 20 seconds for the rest of the programme. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. A lot's been going on, and it probably will be even more tomorrow, who knows. In this game at the moment, anything can happen. But for the moment, Stephanie and Aidan, thank you very much.
Never going to give you up.
Let's hope not.
Absolutely. In a couple of moments, then, we'll be having Saturday morning with Esther and Philip, of course. But from us, ta-ta, and here's the weather.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Clearing skies for many overnight, but there'll be further wind and rain in the northwest by dawn, and there'll be further showers to come in many spots on Saturday. So a much more changeful weekend compared with the heatwave of last weekend. Weather systems are moving in from the Atlantic, and there's one that is expected to turn up during the early hours of Saturday for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Ahead of that, clear spells for many, 1 or 2 showers still affecting western coasts and hills. But really it's around 2 or 3 in the morning that we'll see some heavy rain and strong winds across western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Coastal gales for the Western Isles. Temperatures holding up at 11 to 13 Celsius here, with single figures across parts of northeast Scotland and some sheltered spots of central and eastern England. Some sunshine in the southeast first thing, showers developing elsewhere, and actually the wind and rain towards the northwest sweeps across the rest of Scotland and Northern Ireland, pushing into northern England by the end of the afternoon as a narrow but quite lively feature. Strong winds, odd rumble of thunder, heavy rain. To the south, 1 or 2 showers, but sunny spells are also expected. Breezy, so it'll feel quite cool, but still the potential for mid-20s in the southeast. High teens, low 20s elsewhere, and as we go into Saturday night, it looks like the showers will mostly ease, but still a few lingering across parts of Wales, as well as central and northern Scotland. Away from the showers, again, temperatures in some sheltered spots dipping into the single figures. So a fresh start on Sunday, but a bright start for many. Plenty of sunny spells for central and eastern, as well as northern parts of the country. The cloud will build towards the west and southwest, and we'll see some persistent rain pushing into North Wales, the North Midlands, as well as Cornwall later in the day. That rain then spreads across the country on Monday, turning to showers later.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking